typing, say I pick fire or something of the sorts.
Alright, hold on, bro. I think that there was a glitch. Hold on one second.
That we're not live.
Yeah.
I knew it!
What's going on, beautiful people? I am the Grandmaster, and I also go by d.rey, bringing you guys the draft stream for BBR Season 5. If somehow you saw all the train wreck that happened before this, I'm sorry, but as far as I know, you actually shouldn't have been able to see any of that because I never hit the go live button on YouTube, so that's a thing. Today I am joined by my co-host, Mr. OGalbina. Say hi, bro.
How's it going, guys? Thank you for the patience this morning. Oh, goodness.
I never hit the go live button on YouTube, so I guess you could hit both. I'm not a streamer, y'all, so I don't do that fun stuff. Yeah. So we're live now. Let me toss this music on so you guys can hear it. Boom. So if you guys by any time through the stream, if the music's too loud, if Owen's too loud, if I'm too loud, please let us know in the comments below, or the chat, I should say. Again, don't stream, so let us know in the chat. And a little bit of a backstory. BBR Season 5. This is the draft stream for the main division. This is the first time in BBR history we have the availability and the opportunity to have two separate Wi-Fi divisions. There's the main, which is what we're going to go through today, and the Wi-Fi Developmental League, the D League. So there are 16 coaches there. For this season in main, there are 12. Very exciting times. Down in the description below will be a link to the Discord channel where you can hop in and connect with all the coaches for both divisions, and you can get the roles for each coach to get pinged or added or notified every single time they post their new videos, whether that be for the draft analysis after this video or for the week 1 battles, week 2 battles, all the battles for this season. You guys can get them very firsthand. You guys can watch all those things. So do you want to go over the Tera captain changes from last season to this season and the rules and such? Yeah,
so the Tera rules are pretty similar to last season, right? In the sense that we are going to be selecting one Tera captain per team. So only one mon on your team can Tera. The only difference is last season we had it to where you could declare one typing. For example, I had Roaring Moon. I was Steel at one point, Dark at one point, but I could only Tera into that typing, and that was my one Tera captain. We wanted to kind of expand a little bit and allow for a little bit more variance this season while still keeping it as balanced as possible. So we're going to be implementing a Tera tax. And what that means is, say I draft Dragapult at 18 points, right? The max point value. If I Tera it, it obviously gains value inherently being a Tera captain. So a Tera tax will be implemented, and it's either 20 or 25%. I forget exactly how the numbers work out, but that'll raise the price up, from 18 points to 22 points. And, that goes all the way down throughout the board, and it moves up. It's not always 4 or 3 or whatever it may be. It kind of switches depending on how the numbers work out and things like that. The only other difference beyond that is obviously if we're adding a price to it, just tearing into one different typing doesn't really, show that value. So instead of just being able to pick one type, you're going to be able to pick a stab typing and a non-stab typing. So again, using the example of Dragapult, say I Tera Captain my Dragapult, it's 22 points now. I can Tera into a stab typing, say I pick Ghost, and I can Tera into a non-stab typing, say I pick Fire. I'm allowing for a little bit more variance, but not as open as like a free Tera format or anything like that.
So that's the main differences from last season. Last season we had multiple Tera captains depending on how many points were allotted for those. So this is a little bit of an adjustment from last season for those who've been following us from seasons before. So first of all, if you guys have been, we really do appreciate you. So what is a draft stream? For those who are coming in for the very first time and for those who don't play Draft League. So Draft League essentially is just like fantasy football, whether if it's baseball, more specifically fantasy football, because it's very close to the format in regards to how we get the league set up. So right underneath me are not only the list of the coaches, but this is the actual draft order, starting with mattoshea in the Montreal Milotic. We're going to go in a snake style format. First person picks whatever Pokemon is available on the board, depending on point tiers, where each Pokemon's value is dependent on the value in regards to how good that Mon is, whether if it's offensive or defensive, or what the value point of that Pokemon is, and we pick from that board. And then next after Matt will be Emil, coach of the Montreal Scoruppies, and so on and so forth. So first all the way to 12th, when it gets to the very last pick, for example, like you see here, the Graveyard, coached by J Bear, he will pick twice because he'll pick at the very end of the first round and the very first pick of the second round, and it goes so on and so forth. We're gonna go for about 10 to 11 rounds, depending on how the coaches wanted to verify their teams and how they want to disperse their points. I believe there's only one coach that only picked 10 Mons or 9 Mons. I can't remember off the top of my head, but basically we're going to go to where the coaches don't have enough points. And that makes it as even as possible. There's going to be snipes because now this season we had, let me refer that. Last season we had 2 divisions and 2 separate pools for the draft. This season, it's just going to be one draft pool for all 12 coaches. So we're in the very beginning stages of Scarlet and Violet meta, so there's not as many Pokemon to kind of go around in regards to like filling specific roles. And yeah, exactly. So do you want to go in a little bit more about how that was? I think I lost him, but just kind of speaking from being in the actual draft itself, it was tough. The beginning of the meta is always a little bit tougher because we have he's messaging me. We have a little bit of a limit pool, so there's not as many Pokemon until Pokemon Home is released. So this is the pre-home meta. Let me see. Lower my volume when you get the chance. Got it. But we want to talk to them a little bit about what it's like to draft in pre-home meta.
Yeah, so in general, like d.rey kind of touched on, it's a very limited pool, and in general, it feels top heavy since that a lot of the Pokemon at the top of the draft pool are very, very good, obviously, but then when we start creeping our way down from 18 points to 14 to 13 to 10, a lot of those middle tier Pokemon that you're typically using out to fill out your team and, you know, really, really cover your bases and making sure you're not weak to X type and Xmon and this strategy, that strategy, it's really, really limited and really tough. And I think you'll kind of set a lot of these teams start off crazy strong, and then you get to the middle and you're like, oh wow, there's 4 fairy types in the entire board. Oh wow, there's 3.5 steel types and things like that. So it made it drafting in general a big pain, and you might even see some things go a little bit earlier than they typically would in another draft, just because of how valuable that role is to fill in this very, very limited small Paldea Dex format that we're playing in right now.
Yeah. It was tough, but that's also really cool. Like, as if you guys are watching, if you guys are keeping up with the league, it's cool to have coaches, we'll say, be more creative to fill specific roles, and you'll see how that pans out. Now, more league specifics. The only bans that we have for this season, we have 3, which is the 2 box legendaries, which is Koraidon and Miraidon. And we also, because of the judgment passed of season 4, Fluttermane has received the very first ban of Draft League, at least for the BBR. Do you have any words or any kind of backstory on why we banned Fluttermane?
It's a ridiculous Pokemon. I mean, I always talk about Dragapult when I do my examples. I think of Pokemon. Flutter was that and even more. A little bit slower, but much stronger. Very fast speed outside. Ghost and Fairy is an incredible stab combination, especially when you combine that with the mystical fire coverage that it has. There's nothing that Pokemon can't hit, whether it be with a spec set, a scarf set, booster energy, calm mind sets. It has great utility moves as well. It really is an unguardable Pokemon, especially because we didn't want to enact any Tera bans this season too. So that plus like a Tera Fairy, and then maybe like a Tera Fire or something of the sorts, just seems absolutely ridiculous to deal with, and it's really not feasible in most instances. So that was a ban we had. And then really quickly, I also want to mention, we didn't ban any more Pokemon other than the box arts, obviously, but we do have a couple complex bans, and it's mostly pertaining to moves that are a bit more uncompetitive in a draft league setting, at least in my mind. The first one is going to be Revival Blessing, which is a move learned by Palmont and Rabaska. They cannot run that move this season. It just, in a counter team format where everything is, resources are so specifically allocated and designated to certain things, the ability to have basically a free revive on your Pokemon in the middle of a competitive Pokemon battle, especially this format, is a bit too much. And we also banned Shed Tail in the sense that usually Baton Pass plus Substitute is banned in the draft format, and when we can do both of those things in one move, things get a little bit hairy and a little bit fishy. So those two moves are banned, and then we obviously have the Flutter Mane ban, but that should be it.
All right, guys, some more logistic stuff. So if you guys at any point want to get a link to the coaches, it is going to be !that team. So for example, if you're looking to support Matt in the Montreal Milotic, it's !Milotics, !Scruppies for Emil in the Montreal Scruppies, and so on and so forth. So at any time, we'll start spamming that as the picks go on. But I want to get to who's actually participating this season. I know for those who are big draft league junkies, everyone on screen now is very well known. So very excited to have the BBR kicked off in this manner for the very first season of the brand new timer being released. So now we have the 60-minute timer. It is back. The rule specifics for this season, there is a 60-minute overall timer, but for this season we are conducting a 30-minute your time plus the 60-minute overall timer, which means that the coaches have 30 minutes total to click their moves, and that timer stops during animations. But the overall 60-minute timer will not stop from the very beginning of the matchup. So the coaches do have to predict a little bit more, have to play a little bit faster in comparison to the actual 60-minute timer for the overall game. In the previous season, we were kind of forced and pigeonholed into the 20-minute timer. It means we had to play a little bit faster, and not many times, but there were games that had to unfortunately be decided based on timer. So this is a really cool way to kick things off, and so you'll see some old faces come back to get in the fray with some new faces. So starting off, the very first pick, we have Matt, coach of the Montreal Milotics. We have Emil, was Matt O'Shea, I'll say his full name. Matt O'Shea, coach of the Montreal Milotics. We have Emil and his team, the Montreal Scruppies. Making his return to Draft League, we have Lord Envy and the San Diego Chim Chargers. Another coach, an old face coming back to Draft League, we have Numb Nexus, coach of the Pittsburgh Pichus. Big Titan in the Draft League format currently, we have Kirby, coach of the Winnipeg Blue Blastoise. And making his return with a fresh coat of paint, we have PokeAim MD, coach of the Los Angeles Wakers. John with another fresh coat of paint as well. Old face, old team, new look. The Portland Nightshaders and John Jr. Our co-hosts, we have Carolina Rory Moon, Mr. OGalbina. Myself in the SoCal Annihilation. D-Double, coach of the, I think it's the Edmonton Coilers, if I remember correctly.
Correct. And
then we have new coach. I'm not entirely familiar if he has done draft league stuff in the past, but we have Mephisto, coach of the Nice Jinx. Nice logo. And then we have Jay Bear, coach of the Graveyard. The Graveyard, no location, it's just the Graveyard. So these are the coaches that are going to be participating for season number 5. And like I said before, this is what the draft actual order is going to be. So without further ado, kicking things off, the very first pick of the BBR season 5 is going to go to Matt in the Montreal Milotic, and they pick up Dragapult. So Dragapult goes back to number 1, right? So Flutter Mane's gone, so another ghost type can come in and be king. So as we go, you'll see that the Tera types will be on there. Matt had elected to go ahead and Tera captain his Dragapult, and he selected the stab of ghost and the non-stab of fire. What do you say about Dragapult, right? Super fast. I believe it's the fastest Pokemon outside of Electrode right now, and this thing is incredibly versatile. It can be offensive on the special side, offensive on the physically offensive side, which is really cool. It can spam shadow balls, and now has Tera Blast for the physically offensive stab if he wants to run Dragon Dance sets with Dragon Darts, which is really cool. Awesome pivot and U-turn. This mon basically can be tailor-made to anything, and being at 143 I think base speed, it can run Adamant or Modest in most matchups and still have enough bulk to tank hits, which is absurd. This Pokemon is going to be an absolute menace. It basically ran rampant in Gen 8, so now it's going to do the same in Gen 9. Now that things have kind of settled in, we've had some time to play, we'll see how much Dragapult really makes a big impact on the meta. But here's the second pick, man. What do you think about this one?
Amel picking up Dragonite, one pseudo dragon to the next, obviously an incredible Pokemon. With Tera normal E-speed, it is so difficult to have this thing not snow clean through your team, whether it be with Dragon Dance sets, whether it be with Choice Band sets as well, are going to be absolute nukes. And the Tera flying option is really solid as well, giving this thing a solid from the physical side with Tera Blast. But I think what really makes Dragonite shine in the draft format and why it's so good that Amel picked it up is how versatile this Pokemon can be. You're going to typically see it running Bandit and DD on the ladder, but in draft it can run especially offensive sets, mixed Life Orb, or just mixed sets in general. Really fat defensive sets. I've even seen like cool like Fire Spin tech sets and things like that. This thing is incredibly versatile, incredibly fat with its multi-scalability, and I think a builder like Amel is really going to pop off with a Pokemon like this season. Really playing into its really deep and immense move pool, its great bulk, and its great ability.
And then we have, there it is, the Walking Way goes 3rd overall to Lord Envy and the San Diego Chimp Chargers, and he's going to choose the Tera Captain, this Pokemon with the Water Stab and the Fairy typing. The first Water type sweeper in Sun. So we don't say sweeper, it doesn't get a speed boost, but it does activate its photosynthesis, and having, I think it's, remind me of the move, the name of the move, do you know the name off the top of your head?
Hydro Steam.
Hydro Steam. Hydro Steam is a water type move that actually gets boosted in the sun, which is the first of its kind and absolutely absurd. With the water and dragon typing, this Pokemon's nuts, and it's really fast too. Very strong, very fast. It's almost impossible to switch into. It actually is impossible to switch into neutrally, so this thing's going to be really tough to deal with. With the fairy typing, it's going to be really nice to be able to cover its defensive, and it gives it more of a defensive prowess and allows it to take those dragon types and be immune to it, and actually just take multiple hits, because the fairy typing is only weak to steel and to poison, which is very uncommon for physically offensive moves. So I'm super excited to see how he uses it this season.
Oh man, Iron Valiant up next. Another Tera Cat I'd like to hear next. A really scary Pokemon, whether it be from the physical side, I think 30 base attack, and then from the special side I believe it has 120. So very viable to go special, mixed, physical, whatever you want to be. You can rock out with choice specs variants, you can rock out with booster energy variants in either your speed, special attack, or attack, which makes it so difficult to prep for. The fairy fighting stab combination is obviously incredible, and tearing into that ghost is obviously going to give him really strong options either for Shadow Ball, Shadow Claw, Shadow Sneak, or as well as more setup opportunities for himself to set up that Sword Stance, that Calm Mind. It's a bit frail on that Spadef side, but you can obviously mitigate maybe some screens. Maybe you get up that Calm Mind first and you live the hit, and especially if you get that speed boost. Not many things in this metagame are outspeeding a 116 mon at +1 speed. I think that if Nexus is able to find app setup opportunities and things like that, or just know when to click a button, he's going to do it.
Or we have the boy. I will say before I talk about this Pokemon, the fact that Delibird got some love and got a Paradox form makes me so fucking happy. We have Iron Bundle taken by Kirby and the Winnipeg Blue Blastoise. Fantastic Pokemon. This thing's so fast. Base 136 speed is nuts. The water and the ice typing is crazy. To be able to come in and literally go completely rampant, you can't safely bring in your water type because you just get freeze dried. You do have to unfortunately pigeonhole yourself to having Hydro Pump as your water type stab. Doesn't have anything else, which is unfortunate. But on the plus side, it's one of 2 other Pokemon that got Flip Turn, which is the water type stab momentum move. It's Palafin and it's pre-evolution that got them as well. So those are the only ones that have it. So it's cool to get momentum. So if you think you have a switch into it, if you bring in your pivot, this Pokemon could just click Flip Turn on that switch, and then you have momentum, puts them in the blender, and it's tough to kind of gain that upper hand. But this Pokemon is really strong, it's really fast, and it's going to be a menace to prep for.
Next up, speaking of Flip Turn, we have Pokegame here picking up Palafin, an incredible Pokemon. Now, it does have the downside. Obviously, you have to switch in and switch out to activate that 0 to hero form, but once you you're basically a box art legend with those stats. Like, this thing is incredible, whether it be from the physical side as a breaker, whether it be with bulking up and being ridiculously bulky and obnoxious and taunting and stall breaking, or even special or mix sets are pretty incredible with access to moves like Boom Burst, Ice Beam, and Grass Knot and things like that to really break through those phys def checks that might deal with you. It's not his Tera captain. We typically see Palafin be a Tera captain a lot, but really, it honestly does not need it. It's a very straightforward Pokemon. He's either going to bulk up or it's going to Choice Band Wave Crash in your face and pick up a KO. And if you can find good momentum options to get Palafin in after he switches it out, and he's able to use Palafin's own momentum, he's going to be in a really good spot to really break some holes in some teams.
Yeah. This thing's gonna be an absolute menace for sure. We have Chien-Pao, which kind of got pushed down a little bit thanks to the new toy syndrome and the Walking Wake and Dragapult kind of coming up a little bit. But Chien-Pao is a fantastic Pokemon, and this is going to be the Tera captain for John Jr. and the Portland Nightshaders. Dark and Electric is nuts. Dark for being able to double boost. Well, it's basically going to be an adaptability level boost to crunches, to sucker punches, and then having the Electric Tera is really nice offensively, because typically you want to bring in your bulky water type to come in and take a hit from the ice type stab of Chien-Pao. Although it does take neutral damage to the dark type stab, Electric type stab being able to run Tera Blast allows it to have that super effective damage on those water types that want to switch in. So that's really nice. But this thing is really fast. It has priority options in Shadows, Ice Shard and Sucker Punch, which are both R stab for priority, which is bananas. It has Ice Spinner if you don't want to rely on having to possibly miss on Ice Crash, and Crunch is really cool. So basically that's all you need is Crunch, Ice type stab, priority, blink. So very good offensive Pokemon.
Landorus Tusk is the mon I picked up here next. I really wanted Palafin. I think it's but the fact that Tusk was still here was pretty incredible. It is probably, in my opinion, the best glue piece mon in this format right now. Whether it be offensively, it's a monster with ground and fighting stab alongside knockoff, Ice Spinner, Stone Edge / Rock Slide. But it's also phenomenal defensively. It's one of the best Rapid Spinners in the game right now, which is few and far in between, honestly. Defensive body press sets are great. It can Earthquake instead of Headlong Rushing to not lose its, defenses or anything like that. You can even rock out with bulk up sets and things like that to really clean through teams. Booster Range is a great idea. AV, heavy duty boots. This Pokemon, it really does it all, and I think if I can grab some good supporting pieces a little bit later on, this Pokemon is going to be pretty darn incredible to kind of, mold and build my team around it.
Yeah, Lando Tusk is very, very accurate. It literally fills in the same roles and very similar Pokemon, similar speed tier too, which is crazy. So now I'm going to take Chi-Yu. To me by surprise, that's me. I have Fish! Mr. Fish, we have Red Fish here. Very excited to hit this Pokemon. Aside from Chien-Pao, Chi-Yu is one of those, backstory, my favorite Pokemon in draft are the mons that you just get in and click a button. And this Pokemon is that. With the Dark and Fire types, typing, it's fantastic to be able to spam Dark Pulses, Overheats, Flamethrowers. It's got Psychic for coverage. It isn't my Tera captain because, in my personal opinion, it doesn't need Tera to fully thrive. It's one of those mons that just comes in and just attacks something. And even on a resisted hit, you're getting close to almost 50%. A lot of 2-hit KOs for a lot of Pokemon that don't resist this mon. So it's very nice to be able to come in and just spam moves for no apparent reason. It takes all this crazy damage, which is incredible. I may choose to change my Tera captain. I don't know, but we'll see. But so far, Redfish was the biggest red button that was left still on the board right now, and I'm very excited to use it. Chien-Pao was one Pokemon that I was interested in, but I'm glad that I got Chi-Yu.
Here's my boy. I can talk about Roaring Moon too. This is a good stream so far. Now, obviously, my mascot. It was my mascot pick last season, and it really is an incredible Pokemon that Dell ended up picking up right here. Whether it be with Dragon Dance sets to really boost up and knock out teams with maybe a Booster Energy plus Acro set, or my personal opinion, the best way you can go is with like a Choice Band variant, and you turning around, throwing off big crunches and Earthquakes and Iron Heads and even Outrages and things like that. This Pokemon is a great facilitator of other offense, but also a huge threat in its own right. It has an incredible speed tier. It's ridiculously strong, and even has some good defensive niche application. Like that Chi-Yu that D.Rey has, I brought my Roaring Moon to switch into that guy last season pretty consistently, and you really can kind of play around with like Roost variants and Taunt variants and things like that. This Pokemon, very solid, and I might be a little bit biased. Because it's my boy, but very solid Pokemon nonetheless. I think this is a great pickup by Dell, especially this late in the round. Right? This is a really solid pickup.
Yeah, Roaring Moon's one of those victims that kind of got pushed back because of the new toy syndrome. And now we have Houndstone. So depending on who you ask, This is a pretty solid pick at this time, and it's also some may debate a little bit early. Now, Houndstone can use the busted move in Last Respects. Again, I repeat, this Pokemon can use Last Respects. The format is different. This is now an Uber in the Smogon metagame, but in Draft League it is allowed. It's actually not even that expensive as well, so it's not as veered off or as ravined as the other formats that I should say. So this Pokemon is still going to be a menace, don't get me wrong, being able to spam that move Last Respects. This format's a little bit different, so where that way his opponents are able to prep for it a little bit more, being able to preserve the normal type to have the immunity to Last Respects, being able to preserve the dark type, etc. But it's still a good Pokemon with Fluffy, and access to body press is really nice. So it's not just pinned into that one role of coming in and clicking the Last Respects button, so it's going to be really cool to see if he's able to utilize it even more.
Oh yeah, an oldie but a goodie. We have Garchomp up next here from J-Bear in the Graveyard. Again, oldie but goodie. It doesn't do... well, it does play a little bit different. Typically in the past, especially in 8, you'd see Garchomp play that setup sweep roll. It clicks Swords Dance, it clicks Scale Shot, it was fast and everything, it O-code everything, and you'd be done. This gen, it takes a little bit more of a team roll and being a phenomenal hazard. Getting access to Stealth Rock like before, but also spikes, really facilitating other offense, chipping things down, maybe running with that Tank Chop, Rocky Helmet, Ruskin set, and Dragon Tailing things all over the place, but you can still function with that Swords Dance variant, whether it be like Swords Dance Edgequake Spikes, or whether it be like a Choice Scar set or something like that. It still functions phenomenally offensively depending on the matchup, but now Garchomp has a little bit more of a team aspect that he's going to play a lot, and I think if J-Break gets really strong offense beyond this Pokemon, and obviously Garchomp is the strong offense as well, he's really going to be able to, you know, break down some walls.
Yeah, so timer turns off for us here, Owen, but here we have the round recap. Before I dip into what was taken this round, I do want to give a big shout out. I know that he's in the chat right now. CB Marcus was a big help for us this season. He was able to automate a lot of our stuff to ensure that we have the graphics to provide for you guys during the draft stream. So I do want to take a moment and shout out CB Marcus for his help. It's been a big breeze kind of setting up for this draft stream, so I really do appreciate it, brother. So make sure you guys show him some love, subscribe to him. I know he's in the chat. Click on his profile and subscribe to him. He's a good guy. Now, talking about the round recap for round 1, is there anything here that kind of stands out to you as like it's strange it's coming this early, or maybe fell a little bit farther back than you would have liked?
I think John getting Chien-Pao pick 7 is insane, astronomical.
Yeah.
Now I know there's some incredible Pokemon at the top of the bad, but I personally think that Chien-Pao is like a top format, especially when it can Tera. This Pokemon quite simply has no switch, and so if John can support this thing with a pick 7 Chien-Pao, he is going to have a good time. I really think that was an incredible pick.
Yeah, so a little bit of backstory. Kirby had Chien-Pao in last season, so that's why he kind of bumped that down a little bit. Also Palafin going down to 6. I took Palafin in my pool and picked 3, I think, so having that kind of bumped down is a little bit interesting to me. Dragonite went from 2nd round, 3rd round to all the way in the very top of the 1st round because everyone discovered that Dragonite with Tera normal, or just Tera in general, is an absolute menace. This Pokemon is incredible, being able to Tera normal and just get that stab boost on the extreme speed, and removing all of the weaknesses from the dragon and flying typing is incredible. But also I'd like to point out Garchomp coming at 12 is interesting. It's cool to see that Pokemon, even though it was one of those top mons in Gen 8, been able to squeeze into the very 1st round in a 12-man league is really cool to see. And then Last Respects, I saw you guys in the chat. We banned Fluttermane, but we allowed Last Respects. We're gonna see if it bites us in the butt, but if not, then
It didn't last season.
It didn't last season. There you go.
Play the format, guys.
A completely different format, but we'll see if Mephisto is able to take advantage of that. So with that being said, we're gonna snake around just like we talked about. So for the very first pick of round number 2, we have J-Bear, coach of the Graveyard, and he's gonna take Cinderace. Cinderace is indeed the Libero form, he has access to the Libero ability, I should say. Libero was nerfed. It wasn't nerfed to the highest degree, but it is a lot worse than it was before. And I say that specifically. It's still not bad, it's just not as good, so it's just worse. Having access to Libero and only being able to switch to the typing that you click first. So for example, if you come in with Cinderace and you click High Jump Kick, it'll change to Fighting. and it'll get that stab on the high jump kick. But if you're not choiced in any manner, like with a choice scarf or a choice band, and you click Pyro Ball the following turn, you click Pyro Ball as a fighting type, not as a fire type. So it's gonna only change to the very first move that you clicked in that turn when it comes in. When you switch out and you switch back in, the counter resets, so you're able to change again. So having a choice set, like I said before, isn't as good as it was, but it's still a really fantastic ability. It's just not as good as it was last gen, so we'll see if he's able to utilize that well.
Next up, we have the Sand coming in with the Houndstone. Obviously, for it, incredible Pokemon, very versatile, whether it be just as that smooth rock sand setter, a ridiculously good rocker, phenomenal with an AV, but also Dragon Dance and Rock Polish sets cleaning up games, choice band sets really nuking through teams and just being the ultimate fat breaker. I do think that when you have it with Houndstone, though, you're going to be kind of forced, if you're bringing the stone, into bringing it with a smooth rock a lot of times to really maximize those Houndstone turns, because obviously its speed tier is pretty god awful without the sand. And even with the sand, it's outpaced pretty easily by a lot of Scarfers, but we're not talking about Houndstone anymore. But like I said, it also can offer some support with Thunder Wave, slowing things down. Really just a jack of all trades mon, and really functions well on any team. I'm a big believer in T-Tar. It doesn't even need to be sand offense. You can just have a T-Tar and it's going to do phenomenally well. Really great Pokemon.
And here is the first snipe for me in the draft. Mr. Double, loving to death. Little backstory in the actual draft. I didn't actually say the name in hopes that people would put one and two together. But hey, I was like, hey, the thumbnail mon's still there. So I was going to pick this Pokemon in front of Chi-Yu, but instead I got sniped right before I picked. We have Iron Leaves, the thumbnail Pokemon. Iron Leaves is going to be interesting to watch to see how it does. A very powerful Pokemon. I believe it's base 130 attack, and it's pretty fast at 108 or 109, one of the two. It's not 110, but it's right before that. Very fast Pokemon, very strong Pokemon. It gets great coverage, fantastic coverage actually. And this thing also gets a attack boost with its signature move. I can't remember what the name is at the top of my head, but I got a new Psychic type move that gets boosted in the electric terrain, and it being a future Paradox Pokemon, it also is going to activate its Quart Drive, its ability with the electric terrain. So if he's able to get the only electric terrain setter in the game right now, Pincurchin, this Pokemon can go either very fast or hit very hard. So we'll see what he does with that. And you want to talk about my pick?
Mascot pick for Mr. D.Rey, and I think you talked earlier, you did make the correct choice, I think, in your Tera Cat. Tera Chi-Yu is ridiculously threatening and very strong, but Tera Annihilate is a different beast, y'all, especially with that Tera typing being that fairy for the secondary typing, or he could have gone water, really a plethora of things, something to make it better defensively so that nothing can kill it. But by the way, nothing can kill it anyways if you're investing in this thing's bulk properly. You're going to bulk up, Rage Fist, maybe a Drain Punch if they got a normal type or something like that. This Pokemon is incredibly potent and very scary if DA can support it well, find opportunities to get it in, get those bulk ups up, and really clean through some teams. And Annihilate's another Pokemon that forces very specific prep and can really put DA in an advantageous spot. I think it's a great mon as long as you're positioning it well with bulk up taunt sets, rest sets, protect sets with lefties. Really strong Pokemon. Look at that.
Yeah, and it's a Tera Captain, the Mimikyu homage, which is fantastic. And look, now I get to talk about you. This is working out great. We have Iron Moth, and you're gonna Tera Captain with give it the Tera Captain role with the fire typing and the water typing. The water typing is actually kind of clever. I like that a lot. But I had this Pokemon last season, and it literally, I kid you not, was a plug and play mon every single week, and the sets were very similar because this Pokemon is very threatening offensively, but it still has versatility to cover other roles as well. It's very fast. It hits very strong. I think it's a base 140 special attack, which is absolutely bananas. It is the future Paradox Pokemon of Volcarona. It did not get access to Quiver Dance, which is unfortunate, but it still has access to agility, which is fantastic. It has Flame Charge if you want to get spicy with it. It has access to Acid Spray to drop down special attacks, so if especially defensive Pokemon wants to come in, you're still able to push through those mons. The fire and the poison typing is absolutely nuts offensively. Like, it's crazy nuts, and it's really nice to be able to pair off with Great Tusk to cover those fairy types. That's very nice. What do you think about Goldengo?
Big John grabbing some Goldengo, and I see some hazard stack in our boy's future, which is a really being able to have that Goldengo is also great for those opposing fairy types, really being clean through those guys, and really take advantage of them a lot, whether it be with a Choice Scarf variant. Choice Specs Make It Rain just absolutely nukes through so many teams, plus Shadow Ball and Focus Blast for coverage. You can rock out with Nasty Plot Recover sets, and that defensive typing is so good. We've seen it on Aegislash in the past, and Goldango is no different. Maybe a little bit less bulky, but a lot more speed, and a lot more immediate versatility, I guess, or it doesn't require as intricate play, in my opinion, which is a really cool aspect of Goldango. I believe it can also Thunder Wave, and that ability, good as gold, blocking any kind of status move, not just defog, not just status coming your way like Will-O-Wisp and things like that. Like, any status move that is targeting onto you is simply not going to work, and that can be incredibly frustrating to build and play against. So great pickup by John.
And then next we have Iron Treads going to the Los Angeles Lakers and Pokemon MD. Fun fact, this is actually a trade. So this happened where, I don't know if it was a snipe or not, but John Jr. took Iron Treads, and then Pokemon MD ended up trading him Goldango. So this is a swap. So now it ended up here. Iron Treads, though, is still a fantastic Pokemon. I know that Joey loves his Donphan form. So now we have a Mon that's over base 100 speed. I think it's base 106. Very fast, very fat, very on the defensive side. With the ground and steel typing, is a fantastic typing in general. It's like Excadrill 2.0, but does a little bit of a different role. Both have access to Rapid Spin, which is nice. So now he has that hazard control, which is few and far between this gen. Has access to Stealth Rock. Also pivot momentum and volt switch, and basically a good pivot to be able to come in and get Palafin in safely in some specific scenarios, and having access to get hazard control in regards to removal and actual hazards in one Pokemon is really nice to roll compress. So we'll see if he's able to pair that well with Palafin.
Next up, Volcarona from Kurt. Very good option for his Tera captain. Now I know a lot of people wear that Iron Bundle, which only makes sense, but also going with a Terrifier and Terra Moth. So great minds think alike here, but this thing with Quiver Dance and the ability to shed that those weaknesses that Bug and Fire typing does kind of give is incredible. Also getting that Water typing to, you know, really break through potential Bug and Fire resist, like bulky rocks and things like that, is also really nice. And again, shedding that kind of weakness latent typing for a more solid defensive one, and Water, really being able to invest in that bulk. Quiver Dance up, then either Terra Blast, Fiery Dance, Bug Buzz, Giga Drain through a ton of teams. It's going to be so difficult to deal with, especially with great momentum grabbers like the Iron Bundle, forcing that switch in with its U-turn or their flip turn, getting into Volk, Quiver Dance, game over. So I really do think that this Volcarona was a great pickup by Kurt, and a great option for his Terra. And you're going to kind of see Coach are going to have to choose between two Pokemon which they want to make the Terras, and I think he picked the optimal one.
Yeah, so now comes Greninja. Same thing, also has access to Protein. So the second Protein Mon. Last one was Libero, but this is Protein, the first Protein Pokemon that comes in the fray. This is the first season compared to last season where Greninja is allowed, which is fantastic. Cool to see a fan favorite make its return to Draft League. And this again is the Protein form. Battle Bond is banned, but he can use Protein, a fantastic water and dark typing, able to come in and set hazards with spikes and toxic spikes. Is a good momentum catcher with U-turn, has fantastic priority in Iron and Water Shuriken, as well as Shadow Sneak, which is really nice depending on what set he wants to run. Very good coverage on this Pokemon. This Mon is going to be really nice regards to filling out speed tiers. I believe this is like a little between 121 or 126. It's above 120. I know that for sure.
122.
So, there you go. So this Mon is going to be really nice to be able to outspeed a lot of stuff and just revenge kill things. So it's a great Mon, great stabs that's able to come in and just clean house.
Ting Lu coming up next. I want to talk about a great pairing with the Walking Wake, especially with spikes and rocks, and really sit on the field forever and ensure that you're getting up those spikes and those rocks. There's really not any objectively just stuff or beat Ting Lu, especially in combination with access to Ruination and even Taunt for some really slow, fatter things. No reliable recovery, but honestly, Leftovers plus Protect on a Pokemon this bulky is basically a recover. It is so hard to kill this thing. I don't think, actually, in my 4 or 5 months since draft started and things like that, I don't think I've seen a Ting Lu get O-code. I genuinely don't think I've seen it yet. Because Pokemon, insanely bulky, but also has some good offensive utility. Dark and Ground is a really solid stab combination, like obviously we've seen with Crocodile in the past. And like cool Choice Band variants can really pop off and do well as well. And yeah, it's just an overall really solid Pokemon defensively, and can have some cool niches offense as well.
It's a really cool plug and play defensive Pokemon for sure. And now we have Scizor coming down with Amol and the Montreal Scoruppies. Fantastic Pokemon, fantastic Steel type. Gets access to Defog, so he gets a little bit of hazard control for Dragonite to be able to maintain that multi-scale, which is really nice. It's a Pokemon to come in on those ice type moves, on those fairy type moves. So the synergy with Dragonite is actually really, really good. It's a little bit worse than last gen. It no longer has access to knockoff, which is unfortunate for it, but it can still U-turn and do that fun shenanigans. It's one of a million Pokemon that got access to Trailblaze, and that gets boosted by Technician, which is kind of spicy. So if he wants to get that speed boost shenanigans going, that'll be really nice. So being able to just set up Swords Dance and become a menace with Bullet Punch priority is really cool. But this mon is mostly going to be able to just cover those defensive weaknesses that Dragonite has, which is really nice, but also have that role to be that offensive juggernaut, to be able to come in and clean up the game with said Bullet Punch. So great Pokemon offensively and a fantastic Pokemon to pair defensively with Dragonite.
Next up, mattoshea here picking up Azumarill. Now, if you guys, I don't know any of you guys that are all gen, I think this is the best fairy in the format right now. If you look at all the top 2 Pokemon that we've been discussing thus far, Azu either soft checks or even in some cases walls almost all of them. And I think that is an incredibly valuable thing, especially when you're getting that fairy type and that water all in one roll in such a limited dex. I think this is a great pickup by Matt. I eventually wanted this thing. I wasn't willing to grab it round 2, but I definitely so I think this is a really smart pickup by Matt, whether it be defensively with like Rest Talk variants, whether it be with an Assault Vest to, you know, just be that special sponge with its very solid natural bulk and great defensive typing, or with a Choice Band, or with a Belly Drum set. So very versatile. I think it's forced a little bit more defensively in this metagame just because of the things that it does end up checking a lot of the time, but incredible Pokemon. And I think it was a really, really big sleeper pick by Matt here.
Yeah, it really was. It's in this gen, fantastic mon. So now we're at the round recap for round number 2. Couple different things that stand out to me. Goldango is one of those mons that like is super good value wise for a team. So I think that it was a relative steal at the very middle of round 2. Typically you see that at the beginning of round 1 or the very beginning of round 2 to be able to kind of slide down to the very middle is really cool. It's nice to see Greninja back. But what's the biggest thing that stands out to you in this round?
I think that round 2 Greninja pick is crazy. I think value is incredible. You talk thing with that. There's a spike support that it allows Valiant to have. And once 1, 2, 3 spikes drop, maybe some rocks up as well, there is quite literally nothing that is going to take a hit from that Pokemon. I think Gren is such a good spiker. It's one of my favorite Pokemon to use in the format. And it really promotes good offensive play and good offensive positioning. And it's nothing but better this generation. And not only can it rock out with Protean now, obviously with it being a little bit more nerfed, but it also got access to Swords Dance. And I think Swords Dance Torrent sets are very viable to do and run and, you know, throw off. So
yeah, there's a sorry, my daughter's walking in. Hi. I'm on the stream. Can I talk to you about it in a little bit? You want to cuddle? It was a bad timing. But that is round 2, guys. We're gonna hop on into round number 1, and the very first pick to start that thing off is going to be with Matt sneaking back around in the Montreal Melodic. He's gonna take Corviknight. You want to talk about Corviknight real quick?
Yeah, Corvi's gonna be a great pickup here for Matt. Really rounding out that deals format are super limited in their distribution. So Matt getting a good one is grabbing some more momentum, finding opportunities to switch into that Azu, into that Dragon is going to be great, especially with the Pokemon that Corviknight typically tends to force in. Those Pokemon are going to be great options and great pickups here, whether it be as a solid defog or even like, you know, cheesy bulk up sets and things like that. It really can be a really phenomenal pickup here. So I definitely like it from Matt. I don't know where Big D.Rey went here, but we might be going. Oh no, he's back. Okay, I didn't know if we were going with the next pick too. Alrighty.
Boom. All right. So where are we at? Corviknight? Or perfect. So
Corviknight.
Let's see.
Boom.
All right. So we should keep going on. Did it get stuck?
I think it might have gotten stuck. There we go.
It is. Or just that 1 minute lasted forever. Thank you guys so much. Dad moment. I had to send the little one back to babysitter. Zoroark Hisui, another Pokemon that has come in and is now available for this season. Zoroark is going to be very interesting to watch. They got a huge buff in regards to what it was before. Now it has a base 110 speed stat and the normal and ghost typing, which is absolutely nuts. I believe impossible to switch in neutrally, which is really nice to be able to spam Shadow Balls and Hyper Voices. So we'll see if you can pull off that Hyper Voice throat spray shenanigans. That'd be kind of fire. And then now he also I think Dark Malice, I think is what it's called, got a huge
Bitter Mouse.
nerf coming back from the previous game. What was it? What was that game called? I totally forgot what it was called.
Legends Arceus.
Legends Arceus, but nonetheless, it's still a fantastic Pokemon and great speed tier, and it's got great coverage. So having Illusion as well is really nice to be able to possibly handle those interesting situations. To pull it off is tough, but if you can, it's really spicy.
Next up, we have Envy here, grabbing Torkoal. Nobody took it from. I really was. Somebody went, I'm not going to let you get away, son, because that doesn't sound fun to say again. But nope, he's able to grab it alongside that Tinglu and especially that Walking Wake. And it's really going to facilitate not only giving that Walking Wake the photosynthesis boost, but if you guys didn't know, its signature move and Hydro Steam is also boosted in the sun despite being a water type move, which makes it an incredibly potent Sunbreaker or Sweeper. You can either go special attack boosting and have that instant +1, maybe be specs on top of that and just kill everything that isn't immune to water, or you can rock out with the speed boosting variant and outspeed everything in the sun, especially with that solid speed tier. Obviously, Torkoal is solid on its own. It sets up rocks, it rapid spins, it burns things, but if he gets this, plus maybe another past Paradox Pokemon, or maybe some kind of Sun Sweeper, he's really going to be able to be big. It's going to be really tough to deal with. The Sun got a big upgrade in this Walking Wake ad.
Yeah, that crazy combo. He had to take it early because he knew he wasn't going to grab it if he waited a little bit longer. But next up we have Nexus and the Pittsburgh Pichus taking Skeledirge. So Skeledirge is one of those Pokemon that has proven itself in being an absolute menace. So it's definitely kind of climbed up in the Draft League rankings as a fantastic fire and ghost typing. You'd think that defensively it wouldn't be that great, but this generation fire types are really essential, being able to switch into the vast majority of the meta at the moment. And this Pokemon has all the tools it needs to be very successful on the very bulky side. Having access to Unaware is really nice to be able to come in and just ignore any kind of stab boost. If you're looking to sweep like a Swords Dance or a Bulk Up, it comes in and doesn't care. It's able to just literally slack off all the damage that it takes. It's able to boost its own special attack with its own stab moves, which is really fantastic. Having access to only basically run ghost type stab, fire type move, slack off, insert here like Yawn is very nice. This Pokemon is able to come in and blanket check a lot of the Pokemon that are going to put in his team.
King Gambit, Supreme Agent right here from honestly a Pokemon that when I didn't think it was going to be very good, right? I saw its great stats, ridiculously bulky, access to Rock, Swords Dance, 2 great abilities in Supreme Overlord and Sucker Punch, but I saw that crippling 4x fighting weakness and that low speed. I was like, man, this thing might not be it. But then I used it, and it doesn't die to moves. Even if they're fighting attacks, if it is not a stab focus blast from X strong special attacker, it is not killing King Gambit, which is really awesome. Strong priority, great rocker, can spread T-Waves, Swords Dance. I was awesome with an Assault Vest as well. I think this Pokemon is really slept on in the draft format right now. Kind of looks like he's sleeping on the slide right now with his eyes closed, but he's just getting ready for the season. I think he's going to be a great pickup for Kurt here.
Yeah, King Gambit's nuts. It's just one of those mons on paper you didn't think it'd be very good, and in practice is really kind of filled in on its own. So it's a really great Pokemon. It's a really good pivot in and to be able to cover him with Volcarona, which is great. So now we have the Tera Captain electation for Mr. Pokeem MD. We have his Spathra, and is going to receive the Tera Captain role of Psychic for stab and Fighting for non-stab. This Pokemon has recently been banned to Ubers in the Smogon format, so this Pokemon is going to be, we'll see if it translates to Draft League. It is very tough to deal with. It forces a lot of preparation. This Pokemon is very tough to switch into. It has access to Speed Boost, being a Psychic type move, being able to at the end of each turn raise its speed by 1, and have access to Stored Power is nuts. So each turn Stored Power gains 20 power every single time. Is incredible. Has access to Calm Mind to get even bulkier and harder to deal with. And now that it has the fighting type Tera Blast option, being able to switch in on those ghost types, the dark types and the steel types, is really nice. This Pokemon is going to be really tough to deal with, and it makes complete sense why this is the Tera Captain. This is the one Pokemon to come in and literally end the game then and there.
Next up, we have Glamora. I said I saw some hazard. Phenomenal hazard setter and spikes, as well as its ability to toxic debris, allowing it to basically, whenever it gets hit by a physical, automatically set up T-Spikes, which is an incredible tool, because there might not be a matchup where you want to bring T-Spikes, but you might get the benefit of them just because you sack it off to an Earthquake in the back. You get up a T-Spike, the ground and poison's gone. Bam, everything's poisoned. Really obnoxious mon. Also, very good offensively. I think it's an incredible Pokemon offensively, and people on that with that Neolego dual stab, but being a little bit stronger and having access to Earth Power, other great coverage options like Dazzling Gleam and Energy Ball as well. It can Rock Polish up and sweep, and even has its own removal option in Mortal Spin. There's another Pokemon that I'm super big on the hype train for. I think it's really good as long as you don't pigeonhole it into Focus Sash, Hazard Lead, and while it can do that well, it can do so many things so well.
Next up, we have Rotom Wash. So Rotom Wash is gonna, oh, look at this for Owen. Fantastic Pokemon to pair off here with what he's got going on. This is really cool to be able to have that defensive backbone and being able to switch in on things that want to just get super effective damage onto the Great Tusk, and also being able to get those pivots into Great Tusk are really nice. Losing Defog is unfortunate, and also losing Pain Split is unfortunate, but Rotom Wash still does Rotom Wash things. Fantastic sniping, only allows it to have one weakness in grass, and it isn't even a 4x weakness, it's just a weakness to grass, which is really nice. It's a great pivot. Still being able to chew hits, come on in and Volt Switch out to get in the Great Tusk or the Iron Moth is really nice. It does still have access to Will-O-Wisp and Thunder Wave, so it can still status opposing Pokemon and cripple them and allow the rest of the Pokemon on Owen's team to kind of take forward from there. But this mon is a really great bulky pivot. Having only that one weakness is fantastic. Having only Hydro Pump as his Water Stab is unfortunate, kind of the same as Iron Bundle, but nonetheless it's still a great Pokemon defensively.
Next up, we have d.rey grabbing some Grimmsnarl. We need some, making it nigh impossible to kill, especially with how little status. It can always just rest up, it can always just taunt, and then we give it some screen support. Man, and you want to defog those screens away? Get rid of them? No, I'm defiant. I'm getting a +2 boost because you did that. Oh, you want to break them away? No, I'm a ghost type. You can't do that because I'm just going to switch in and take advantage of my screens. So I think Grimmsnarl +8 is a really potent combination in how well it facilitates Ape, setting up bulk ups and winning the game. But Grimmsnarl obviously does other things as well. Having access to that Prankster Parting Shot to get into that Chi-Yu and click a button. Having access to bulk up and Prankster bulk up like Rest Talk variants are also very solid. Dark and Fairy is a really good typing defensively as well. Like this is one of the premier, in my opinion, Dragon Bolt checks in the format as well. So really solid pickup. I guess unless it's terrifying, so good luck. But very good pickup from d.rey. Really facilitates his offense. If he can get some more setup and really, throw off some big attacks, he's going to be in a good spot.
Yeah, next up we have is Slitherwing. Slitherwing is one of those cool Pokemon. It kind of fell down a little bit more from what it was last season, but it's still a fantastic fighting and bug type. Being able to have those really powerful first impressions for priority is really nice. And fun fact, I learned this last season, but first impression actually out prioritizes extreme speed, which is actually kind of nuts. Sorry, Jet Punch. So I had Palafin last season and it out prioritized Jet Punch, and so that was one of the reasons why I was having a headache in that matchup. So this Pokemon is really nice to be able to come in and revenge kill things. It has access to stab U-turn. It gets close combat if it wants to have Flare Blitz to be able to hit those steel types. If it doesn't want to run its fighting type stab, that's really nice. It's able to really cover a lot of its own checks and be a very strong menace. Buzzwole 2.0, it's pretty solid to come in on those ground types. It can be defensive if he wants to do that, but being able to have it as a strong pivot to come in and either blow stuff up itself or just to pivot something else in is really nice.
Oh yeah, next up we have Sandy Shocks, which is a Pokemon I personally really think it's a solid pickup on this team, giving it something to break through waters, which it doesn't necessarily switch into them with that ground typing, but it really does scare them out with either Volt Switch, Thunderbolt, or Discharge. Getting another dual hazards mod is also great with Spikes and Stealth Rock, which is obviously very solid. And really a pretty one-dimensional Pokemon in the sense that it might throw off some Volt Switches and be Scarf Specs and click buttons. It might set up some hazards, but it does those things so well. And Ground Electric is really hard to guard against for a lot of teams, and really the only typings that switch into that consistently is going to be like Fat Grasses potentially, maybe Dragons depending on which dragon it is, but really Fat Grasses, and as long as he can get some things to take advantage of those, and there's really not that many great in the format in general, he's going to grab some great momentum, set up a lot of hazards, and hopefully chip things down in the range of that Houndstone and just win in the game.
Yeah, Sandy Shocks is cool, probably one of the best designs of the Paradox Pokemon in my personal opinion. I think it's cool it has a tail now. Baxcalibur comes in. Baxcalibur is a fantastic win con. This Pokemon is so tough to switch into once it gets boosted up with Dragon Dance, and now that it has the Tera Captain role, it's going to be even better. He elected to give the stab of Dragon and also the electric type captain role, which is really nice, being able to come in and really blow things up with the Dragon Dance boost. So having it stab and plus the stab and ice, and also now having Tera Blast with electric is really cool. So having that bolt beam coverage after that Dragon Dance is fantastic. Great mon, and having access to Glaive Rush, which is a signature attack. Basically no drawback if you end up killing the Pokemon anyway. The harsh drawback is if it takes more damage from the following move, but if you're gonna knock it out, it doesn't matter anyway. Base 120 attack on a Dragon type move is fantastic when the next strongest move is Dragon Claw and then Outrage, which you can't switch moves, which is unfortunate. So Glaive Rush is a fantastic addition to be able to add to his repertoire whenever he wants to go for those Dragon Dance sweeps, but it also has some versatility too. With the ice type stab with snow warning, that'd be really nice to see if you can pull stuff like that off. But what do you think about round number 3?
Round number 3 had some really solid picks. I think the Glamora pick for really overloading a lot of things, checked by very much similar things. Not a lot of fairies in the format. Excalibur might be checked by some steals, but Garchomp kind of rips through those. Maybe some bulky waters can be annoying, but you can also one breaks through one of them, the other one's going to thrive, which is obviously really, really cool to see. Whether it be Swords Dance variants, Dragon Dance variants, that Tera Dragon Glaive Rush is going to be so scary for teams. And then even Tera Electric, Tera Blast are going to be really solid for the Azumarill matchup, the Klefki matchup, whatever it may be. He has that option as well, so I think that's a great pickup here as well.
Espathra is going to be a menace. Having it go in round 3 is intense, and it's a lot better that it has the Tera captain role than it would without it. So the fact that it does makes it a really cool pickup for PokeMMD. Biggest thing that stands out to me is that he does run Double Dragon. That's d.rey. He runs Double Dragon on his team, so having options later on in the draft to switch into fairy types is something that's going to be a big must. So Double Dragon is really cool offensively, but ensure that he has that backbone to take care of that defensively is going to be really important. And also Corviknight going at the very beginning of round 2 makes all the much sense. It's a steel type that still has defog. It does basically everything that it did in generation 8 and the same in generation 9, except for the little bit of a nerf to Roost. Aside from that, it's still a fantastic defensive steel type Pokemon. It retained everything, so it's a really cool pickup to the very beginning of round 3. So with that being said, we're going to kick things off to round number 4. Snaking back around, we have J-Bear that is going to take Gengar. So Gengar is going to be a fantastic Pokemon to be able to pick up here to cover those fairy types. So as I say that in the round recap, he shuts me up with Gengar. He covers up that fairy type weakness very nicely. Having that base 110 speed stat is actually really, really nice. So Gengar is going to pair fantastically, be able to come in on those fighting type moves that want to come in on Excalibur, being able to be immune to them. It is a little bit of a risk, but it could pay off big if he's able to get that in safely, because it can return with big sludge bombs, big sludge waves, big shadow balls, and insert coverage move here. It gets access to Focus Blast to be able to cover those normal types that want to come and be immune to the ghost type stab. Thunderbolt if it wants to come in on a set Corviknight, things like that, to be able to resist or be immune to that steel typing, which is cool. It does have access to Toxic Spikes, which makes it a really cool Focus Sash Toxic Spike lead. So you want to make sure you're bringing grounded poison against this team. And it's also a Pokemon that is touching the ground itself, so it's able to soak up Toxic Spikes for its own team, for J-Bear's team. So that's very nice to have. And I think it's going to be a big menace to take care of those fairy types.
Oh, for sure. Oh man, I get to talk about another menace. Look at that. We have we have Mephisto here picking up big Salamence, which is always, whether it be for its offensive Dragon Dance variants, either Intimidate to facilitate its own self, or with Moxie to just compound boost after boost after boost. But I really think Mence thrives when you can be a little bit more tools that it does have, whether it be with really fat defensive sets, like we said, with Intimidate plus Roost. It can be really solid defensively and checking a lot of scary offensive threats, with access to a really solid special attack side. I think it's 110. I should really know that, but I think it's 110, and access to Hurricane and Draco Meteor and Flamethrower, Flyer Blast, and even Hydro Pump for some reason. It can really be really solid from the special side as well, and really function as that solid pivot, as well as that Dragon Dance Sweeper, or even that Moxie Choice Scarf Sweeper. Come in, click a Dragon Claw on Outrage or Quake, pick up a KO, and then start picking up some more because you're already Choice Scarfed up.
Now we have another Unaware Mon coming off the board. We have Big Dondozo going to D-Double and the Edmonton Coilers. Fantastic pure water type Pokemon. With Unaware, it makes it even bulkier. So typically bulky water types, or just bulky Pokemon in general, kind of fall victim to setup options. But this is really nice because it's able to come in on those setup already Pokemon and just basically ignore any kind of stat boost. So if you want to click Swords Dance, doesn't matter if Dondozo comes in. If you want to click Nasty Plot, doesn't matter if Dondozo comes in. Fantastic Pokemon, very bulky, very good offensively as well, giving it access to Wave Crash for stab, hits really, really hard. It doesn't have any recovery outside of rest. If it had Slack Off, I think this thing would be incredible, kind of put it over the top in a way, being able to just shrug hits off. So it isn't completely comparable to Skeledirge, but having the pure water typing is really nice defensively. Only having weaknesses to electric and grass is top tier. So this is a good defensive backbone for this team. What you think about my Don fan?
We have average Tusks here going round 4.
Oh, no.
GrandMasterDRey. Good Pokemon though. Average Tusk, obviously giving D.rey that ground type, those rocks, which he only had an Annihilate right now. It's not really a move you want to click on Annihilate. Really, 9.9 times out of 10, you're not running Rocks Annihilate. You want to bulk up and win the game, especially with the team that you're building. So I think that was really a clutch aspect again. And that knockoff support, it seems really weird to like key in on that, especially on a ground type, a more defensive one. But I think it's such a valuable tool in this generation where not a lot of things can remove items from other teams. And it's such a valuable tool to really be able to chip things down. Maybe the bulky water that switches into the fire move on Shiyu wants to switch into Donphan as well. But you catch it with that knockoff, then Flamethrower is a 2-hit KO after Rocks, or something of the sort. You have Ice Shard priority, Rapid Spin, and honestly, really strong offensively. People really sleep on how scary an adamant choice band Donphan can be to switch into. You also have Sturdy, and plus like heavy duty boots, it basically gives you an uh-oh scary button, so that's always clutch as well.
Yeah, I'm super excited. I had Donphan last season. I had to let it go, but now I'm very excited to get a second chance to use that again. Next up, we have Screamtail for my co-host here, Mr. OGalbina. Screamtail is, I fell victim to it. I thought to myself, damn, this Pokemon is not very strong. It's not a threat. And then it sat in front of me and proceeded to set up, and I lost the game. So this Pokemon is very tough to deal with. It's a great Psychic and Fairy typing. Being able to come in on those fighting types is absolutely clutch. A good defensive backbone. It's also very fast. At base 111 speed, I think is what it is. Very fast Pokemon to set up those, to get those taunts off, to be able to set up those Calm Minds, being able to just spam Wish for the rest of the team, which is really cool for Great Tusk as well as for Iron Moth. Even though Iron Moth does get access to Morning Sun, it's cool to be able to pivot an attacking move instead, and being able to pivot in with the Wish is really cool. But this Pokemon is really nice to just come in and pivot on a lot of stuff, and also be that really niche win con button. So I'm very excited to see how you use that this season.
Big Quackle Ball for John here, giving him a Rapid Spinner, which I think was the main. A really solid offensive Pokemon. I really do like Quackle Ball a lot, whether it be with like a Choice Band variant, really compounding boost with Aqua Step boosting its speed, and Moxie boosting its attack when it picks up a KO. Water Fighting is obviously an incredible stab combination we've seen from the likes of Keldeo and Urshifu in the past, but it also has access to Ice Spinner for grasses, as well as Brave Bird to nuke through things. You can also rock out with bulk up sets, whether it be bulk up plus Roost, or Taunt, I believe it also gets, which is a really clutch aspect. So it can function as that bulky bulk up sweeper if you do find the opportunity in the match to do so, but also a great Scarfer, great with a band, and solid hazard control as well. I really do like Big Quackle. I know John's not a big fan of it, but I really do think this thing's great, and I love his design. I love the Moxie he has. I think Moxie was the perfect ability for this guy, because he's always ready to go. That's my guy, so definitely excited to see.
Yeah, starter after starter, we have Meowscarada dropping all the way to round number 4 in comparison to last season. Fantastic Pokemon. Here's our other protein mon, so they're all off the board. Meowscarada is a fantastic mon to be able to be offensive. It has access to spikes, so it can be that hazard setter. It can be that pivot Pokemon. It's able to come in on those ground types, move on out. It gets access to knock off with stab, which is really cool. It gets access to play rough for coverage for other dark types. It's one of those mons that kind of has enough to really do what it does best. Meowscarada is going to be a really good Pokemon to pair off with Great Tusk, which is really nice to get rid of those bulky water types. It's also able to come in and switch on those ground types, like I said before, and he has Palafin to be able to switch on those fire types that take care of the both of them. But the synergy on this team is looking really nice. Having that dark type is fantastic. To not have to lose to those opposing psychic types is fantastic. So some may say dark types are very essential to a team. Even though this is the protein version, it's still really good to have on a squad.
Next up, we have Slowking, one of my season, and it still functions the exact same as it did last gen. I know it, which was actual negative priority, but let's 100% on Everything this Pokemon clicks, unless it's under Trick Room, is basically negative priority with its speed. So you're always ensuring a slow pass out with that chilly reception, essentially, as long as you're smart with it. It's great with boots. It's great with an AV. It sets up future sights. It has great coverage. You can Calm Mind and Nasty Plot. You can set up Trick Room for the King Gambit if you really want to as well, which I think is a clutch aspect. And you're really, really going to be able to function as that really solid Spadef pivot for this team. And a really, really solid bulky water. Absolutely one of my favorite Pokemon to use in the format. And I love to see the come up that Slowking has gotten. Whereas back in Gen 7, it was much worse than Slowbro, in my opinion, than Gen 8. It was a little bit more even. I'd say I'd lean Slowking, and then Gen 9 leagues above it. That's my boy. So I'm happy to see him really pop off, and it's a good pickup for Kurt.
Next up, we have Clodsire. More fat comes off the board. We have our poison ground type buddy here, which is the Paldean form of the Quagsire line. Fantastic Unawaremon. So there was another one, excuse me, I'm remembering this thing on the water absorb aspect, but it is a fantastic unaware Pokemon, being able to come in and ignore all those boosts. I feel like it all the Unawaremons, which is funny. But this Pokemon is really nice to come in, and like I said before in the past poison types, being able to come in and not only set up toxic spikes and stealth rock, but be able to absorb the toxic spikes for his team. So Numnexus doesn't really have to worry about that in the very long scheme of things. Being able to come in and automatically remove those toxic spikes is very, very essential. And it also kind of dissuades his opponent from being able to bring toxic spikes. So that's a cool little element to add. This Pokemon is able to come in and sit on a lot of things and just literally recover up and not really worry about it. So it's a really good Pokemon in that aspect. It has access to Gunk Shot for stab, Earthquake obviously, but all it really needs is just to have one or two attacking moves and just recover. It's the main thing that it has for that. What do you think about Iron Hands?
Really, really solid Pokemon. So annoyingly obnoxious. Beyond that, Wake is his team is so ridiculous. He's going to be in a good spot. Iron Hands is one of those Pokemon, whether it be with Assault Vest sets, which are really, really good, with that electric fighting stab alongside Earthquake and Ice Punch, and I think Fire Punch as well, which will be boosted in the sun, which is obviously a really cool aspect, but also Swords Dance variants. I think Swords Dance left variants are going to be really, really obnoxious, or even like a niche Belly Drum set if you can find the opportunity to pick a KO that way. If you can Belly Drum up, then Drain Punch all your health back, it's going to be a tough time for the opponent. It's going to be very, very scary. So I think this is a great Pokemon. Also has access to Volt Switch. It's going to be able to get in and out and get in that Wake potentially and click a button. And those grasses that typically want to switch in on this are one less, Spadef switch into that Hydro Steam from that Walking Wake. Not that they typically switch into it anyways, but definitely a big one.
Next we have is the Paldean Aqua Tauros, the Tauros of Water with Emil and the Montreal Scrappies. Fantastic Pokemon. We kind of what's the best word to describe this? Underestimated these Tauros. So we kind of bunched them up last season, where if you draft Paldean Tauros, you get all three of them. But this season, we're like, yeah, that was a mistake. So we split them apart. So now we got the water version only. So it's the only one he has access to. Base 100 speed stat isn't as good as the regular Cantonian Tauros, but it's still a fantastic speed tier. Has access to Raging Bull, which turns into water typing, but also Wave Crash, who wants a little bit more of a oomph boost to that. He also has access to Priority and Aqua Jet. Having Intimidate is fantastic to automatically come in and drop attack. Is really, really clutch on the more of the support side, I guess you can say. Has access to Bulk Up to be able to set up and sweep. I've seen some Paldean Tauros run Bulk Up plus Trailblaze to get that speed boost and be an absolute nuisance, so it's interesting to see what he does with this season.
Next up, we have Rotom Heat. More Matt's team, and we talked about it during the draft, just looks like a Sword and Shield draft at this point, but it's a very good Sword and Shield draft up to this point. Obviously, Rotom being a great momentum grabber. Another thing that really beats a lot of the check Holt and checking a lot of those fairies defensively and really being able to switch on those. That plus Corviknight basically makes them offensively a non-factor against his team. It did, again, just like my Rotom Wash, lose access to Pain Split and Defog, which is huge, but that doesn't really stop how good of a Pokemon they really are. It's definitely their worst, but they're still very, very good. Spreading T-Waves and Will-O-Wisps. Another great aspect of Rotom is it's almost unguardable when it comes to Volt switching, because those grounds aren't going to want to switch in on a Will-O-Wisp or an Overheat, at least most of them. So that makes Rotom really, really solid in being able to kind of just Volt switch around forever and ever and ever, and really grab good momentum, spread a lot of burns. This thing is a Will-O-Wisp machine more than any of the other Rotoms in my opinion as well. So great pickup.
And in our round recap, the biggest thing that stands out to me is Meowscarada dropping this low. I think that the combination of what Pokemon has on his team now is really, really nice. As well as Quaquaval. I know that John Jr. said that he wasn't the biggest fan of that Pokemon, but I think it's an absolute menace. Having the combination of an attack that boosts your speed and an ability that boosts your attack, basically giving you a free Dragon Dance every single time you click your own stab, is actually kind of nuts. So to get it this late in the draft, even though some may not view it that high, is actually really nice. So what's the biggest thing that stands out to you?
That Meowscarada made me upset because actually I think we forgot to mention is originally Mephisto drafted it and AIM drafted Salamence. It was so close to getting the Meowscarada. I really want. So that was a really good pickup for his team, though. Obviously, with the spikes and knock, like you mentioned, is really solid. But you kind of touched on my two favorite picks. It has to be John's and maybe Matt's Rotom Heat as well. Great Pokemon. But I do want to remind you guys, if you've been watching and enjoying, we got 72 people right here right now, and I appreciate you. But if you haven't dropped a like on the stream, you got to make sure you do so. And I really want you guys to go ahead and join that BBR server so that you can catch these games as they're uploaded, catch the draft analysis as they go up after this video, and all that good stuff.
Yes, please. I didn't mention it because I forget to promote my own stuff because it's my own stream. But yeah, like the stream, guys. But also in the description will be a link to all the YouTube channels, as well as leaving an exclamation point with your favorite team, and you get the link directly from the Nightbot in the chat. That'll be really cool. I also would really appreciate it if you go, like he said, to the Discord server where you will find the D.League coaches, which is my big project and my biggest want of the BBR is to ensure that we get new faces in the Wi-Fi draft league scene. The timer is going to bring people back. We already know some of these faces, but to bring fresh faces in and develop them into the content space is my biggest goal. So please support all of the D.League coaches. That would mean the absolute world to me. And without further ado, let's hop on into round number 5. We're wheeling back around for Matt as he continues on the journey for his Galar draft. He brings Crocodile. He doesn't draft one new Pokemon yet from Generation 9, but Crocodile is a fantastic dark and ground type, a good roll compression Pokemon. Big nerf to this mon. Unfortunately, even though he has big meaty claws, big fat hands, they took knockoff from him, which really sucks. It still has access to crunch for dark type stab and access to earthquake, which is still gets the job done, but knockoff is such a good move, one of the top moves in the game, and having it lose it is really unfortunate. Still has access to taunt, still has access to stealth rock, so still does what Crocodile does, but it just doesn't do it as well. We got a 9 out of 10 to an 8 out of 10. Great dark type, great ground type, has access to intimidate to be able to come in and automatically drop attack every single time it just touches the field, which can be really good and clutch for the matchup, as well as having Moxie for his ability. Being able to come in, slap a choice scarf on it, and snowball a game is a really cool aspect to have in team building.
Oh, for sure. And now we're going to kind of start this might be the round where all these fairy types are going to start going off the board. Is right now kind of recognizing that, hey, it might be time to kind of snap. What Florges offers to his team is going to be a very solid wish passer, especially with something like Scizor that doesn't have recovery anymore. Losing access to Roost, being able to keep that thing healthy is really nice, as well as something like the Aquapaldia as a pretty solid bulky water, but a bulky water that, again, has trouble staying healthy. Same thing with the Dragonite. We're going to be able to wish into those things, keep them healthy, keep them raring to go, as well as Florges itself being solid. It can recover its own HP in one turn with Synthesis. It can go ahead and Calm Mind Up and Sweep. I've even seen Specs Florges do really well. It struggles a little bit on the coverage side, which means it really struggles with steel types, but other than that, it's pretty darn strong, and it is a Spadef monster, which really pairs with the physically defensive, typing of Fortress, Scizor, and the Aquapaldia.
And then, like you said, this is the era of the fairy type, and being at the tail end of the round is really unfortunate, as you see all the mons that you want slowly start to go. We have Hatterene going to Lord Envy in the San Diego Chim Chargers. So Hatterene is one of those Pokemon that either you love it or you think it's not that great. I think it's really good. Having access to Magic Bounce to have that element of status control as well as hazard control is really cool. Being able to come in, and if you want to set up any kind of hazard, stealth rock spikes, toxic spikes, and just by switching in Hatterene, if you get that call correctly, and it will bounce back those hazards to have it on your side instead of the opponent's side, or the opponent's side instead to your side, vice versa, is really, really cool. It doesn't remove hazards, but it basically deters them, which is a great element to have. It doesn't get Moonblast, but it does get Dazzling Gleam, has access to Psychic type moves, gets access to Calm Mind. It's one of the few fairy types that retain Mystical Fire, which is actually huge for a fairy type, so very clutch move here.
Next up, we have Noivern here from the Pittsburgh Pichus. More speed. He is either really fast or really, really slow. But great pickup here for Nexus. He's also going to give him some more momentum to grab U-turns, especially when he's going to be forcing in typically steel types and potentially fairy types. But mostly those steels coming in, getting that free switch into Valiant is going to be a really clutch aspect. This Pokemon on its own, though, can be very strong offensively with potentially throw spray sets, but as well as choice specs, I think is a very scary thing that Noivern can offer, especially with its access to fire coverage to hit those steel types, and then Hurricane plus Draco hitting pretty much everything else. And then also its defensive application with Super Fang and Taunt, and like we mentioned, U-turn and Defog and Roost. It can really, really be obnoxious with its incredible speed tier, allowing it to invest very heavily in bulk, especially in such a slow metagame. I think this is a pretty solid pickup for Nexus, and his team is looking really, really scary up to this point.
Yeah, go fast, go slow. That's what you got. Serena comes now. Serena is a fantastic Pokemon. I love Serena so much. This one has such a good utility wise. It's also be able to be that really crazy offensive threat. Still with base 120 attack is absolutely nuts. Still retaining Power Whip. Having access to Trop Kick is really cool to be able to drop down those attack powers of those Pokemon that want to come in to continue being that physically defensive nuisance, which is really cool. Or especially defensive if you slap an Assault Vest on it. It still has access to U-turn for pivot momentum, has access to High Jump Kick for fighting type coverage, gets access to Play Rough, which is really nice. This mon's able to come in and be the jack of all trades depending on what the matchup needs. It's able to come in and deter hazard, to deter status boost, to be able to come in and taunt, which is really nice. So it can able to become in. It doesn't have knockoff. It lost knockoff as well. But it also has hands, so I don't know why it lost knockoff, but that's the thing.
Everything lost their hands in Gen 9.
Everyone lost their hands, I guess. So it can't knock off and switch out, but it still can come in and chew a hit and then U-turn back out, which is really cool.
More fairy types. We have Pokemon here picking up, providing phenomenal Wish Pass to his team. It's a really, really solid combination. Especially Sylveon covering a lot of Tread's weaknesses. Really, besides fire, it can kind of help it out a ton. Well, I guess ground as well. But it really helps out with those offensive fighting types, which is another thing that's really important for this team when you're Psychic and your other fighting resist is a Spothra, and we don't really want to use that as a defensive switch in if we can at all avoid it. But it's going to pass Great Wishes. It's going to potentially Calm Mind up and win itself. It's going to Baton Pass around, and we did see this eventually. Baton Pass is allowed in the league, but you do have to only use it as a momentum grabbing. You can't Baton Pass or Calm Mind out with to catch a switch. You can't Baton Pass for momentum, so he can Wish plus Baton Pass into something like Treads, into something like Palafin, and especially with that slow Baton Pass, it's really, really solid.
It's a good momentum grabber, which is fantastic. Speaking of momentum grabbers, we have Cyclizar. Cyclizar does not have access to Shed Tail, in our personal opinion. Having access, basically, we can't sub passes, like he said, banned. So being able to sub and pass in the same move is theoretically not allowed, so we're not gonna let it this season. So Shed Tail is not allowed for this Pokemon, but nonetheless is still able to basically function really, really well as a support mon, and it can be pretty spicy to be offensive as well. It does get access to shift gear, so that could be something that he does, but he has access to U-turn nonetheless to build the grand momentum, which is really cool. It's a normal type that has access to rapid spin, so it gets stab on removing hazards, which is really cool. This Pokemon gets access to knockoff, which is nice. To be able to remove items off the opposing team is really, really nice. And then grab momentum. It's still a dragon in normal, so it has pretty decent immunities in that ghost typing and good resistances, so it's a good mon to grab that momentum as well.
Alrighty, so I'm up and I grabbed Fortress right here. Now I'm sure you saw everybody grabbing their fairies. What happened? Another typing, and I liked Fortress a lot here. Now I already do have, but having a spinner in such a hazard potent metagame is a really important thing to me. So I like the double spin, but I especially like the spikes that it offers my team, being able to really chip things down for Great Tusk, for Iron Moth to come in and win the game, as well as for that Volt turning or that Volt switching Rotom. That Grass type comes in, it takes a spike, takes a Volt switch. Now it's either going to die to my Iron Moth, or it's going to switch out, have to take another spike coming in, and then die to my Great Tusk Close Combat or Ice Spinner. So I really think it facilitates this well. I haven't always been the biggest fan of Fortress in the past, but I do think that its access to body press this generation makes it a little bit less passive. It can volt switch around, and it can always boom in like an uh-oh moment to make sure that it's not set up fodder or being a little bit passive. So I'm definitely really, really big on Fortress this gen.
Yeah, I was able to switch the status quo so we could talk about our own pace, which is fantastic. So now I get Lycanroc Dusk for my team. This Pokemon was here at this moment, and at round 5, I felt if I didn't take it now, I'll probably get sniped, because that's been happening a lot this draft. This draft, I basically have been murdered with snipes. So to avoid losing this Pokemon, I wanted to take it now. Lycanroc Dusk fills out a 110 speed tier that I really wanted, and it's also going to be that one-click button. I talked about it in the beginning. I love Pokemon that come in and just click buttons, and this is one of those mons that does so as well. Having access to that Tough Claws ability is really nice with the coverage that it has. A lot of its coverage make contact, so Tough Claws, it gives you a 30% boost to those attacks that actually touch the opposing Pokemon, like Close Combat. It gets that 30% boost, which is really nice. Having access to Excel Rock for its priority move and also making contact is fantastic. Also having access to Play Rough, which is really, really nice. A lot of coverage moves, gets access to Crunch, so it's able to come in, click a button, and really revenge very, very easily.
Next up, we have Dell. Again, those steals and those fairies are going. And Dell's going to grab right here in Magnezone. Steel trapping option is potentially pretty nice for something like the Iron Leaves. It does have to Close Combat to break through them, but regardless, it's nice to be able to force those things into a Shed Shell, or just chip them down with a strong Thunderbolt or Body Press so that you can knock them out, as well as the Roaring Moon, being able to click its Dragon moves a little bit more often. Magnezone really pairing well with that, opinion, checking pretty much every fairy in this game very well, as well as helping out that that Iron Leaves, and really forming a solid Volt turn core with the Roaring Moon. Roaring Moon forcing in those fairies and things of the like, and potentially even those steals. Then Magnezone coming in, either forcing them out or getting big damage off on them or something else. Obviously, Magnet Pull isn't the only thing it can do. It's an sturdy button with heavy duty boots. I always really value having sturdy mon that you can heavy duty boots in a matchup where you don't have an offensive or a defensive answer or something, and you always have something to come in and force something out. I've done it with Steelix plenty of times, and obviously Analytic is a great ability as well.
Yeah, Magnezone's been slept on, but still a fantastic Pokemon. Next up we have is Toxapex. Thinking of a Pokemon that a lot of people sleep on. Now, you love it or you hate it, right? This mon got very nerfed. very nerfed. The water typing lost Scald unless your name is Volcanion, and Volcanion is not even in the game. So having a bulky water type that lost access to Scald is kind of unfortunate, and Toxapex is one of those Pokemon that really fell victim to that. Now, the game did introduce another move. It's called Chilling Water, which is kind of worse Scald. It gets basically the secondary effect is you 100% of the time drop the attack power of that Pokemon, but all you have to do is just switch out, switch back in, and then your attack gets basically recovered, right? So you get that attack stat back. So it's not like Scald being burned, but this Pokemon still does Toxapex stuff. It comes in, sits on stuff, recovers, sets up Toxic Spikes. It can Baneful Bunker as a protect move. It's got some decent utility. It's able to come in on those fighting type Pokemon, but we'll see if he's able to utilize it how it did last gen.
Next up, another Steel and another Fairy, and Jaybear picking up Klefki right here, giving him more spikes, which is never a bad thing, giving him dual screens as an option with his Baxcalibur, which is never a bad thing, and also giving him a Pokemon that something like Baxcalibur might be a little bit annoyed by it, either clicking T-Wave on non-Tera electric sets, or Foul Playing, or Magnet Rising, or whatever it might be. Picking up an annoying check for that thing is obviously going to be very solid. Spreading Thunder Waves for things like Gengar, Baxcalibur, Garchomp is going to be a great form of speed control, and again, it's one of those fairies, one of those steals that is really hard to come by in this format and in this metagame, so being able to grab both in one Pokemon is very important and very clutch. I had Klefki last season, and I really love it in this metagame. Favorite fairy in Generation 8 and 7 and even 6, but I think it really thrives in this limited decks, considering the other options that we have right now.
Yeah, it's a plug and play, try and true, especially if you're trying to set up and win. He's got a couple setup threats now, which is really nice, and being able to have that option to just set up those screens and set up and win would be really cool. Now we have the round recap before the halfway mark. I do want to let you guys know before we start into round number 6, we're going to take like a 5-minute little break for Ona and I to kind of gather ourselves, and then we'll start the second half.
I have to go to the bathroom so bad. So
Before we go into round number 6, biggest thing that stands out to me in this round, Toxapex. I don't think it's that great anymore. I mean, it's a good mon. I mean, if you really value it, it's fantastic, and if it fits your team and it kind of fills the roles that you need, I don't think that Toxapex is that great. I looked at it for myself actually, as I say that, but at the same time, it lost so many pieces to what made it so valuable in the past that it's just not worth it in my opinion. There's other water types, but what's the biggest thing for you in round 5?
I think like the trend of steals and fairies really fast. Obviously really important. I like the Sylveon pick a lot. I like Crocodile as well. I think a lot of people Crocodile just because of the fact that it did lose Knock, which is, like you said, a big nerf, but it's still a very incredible Pokemon. Setting up rocks, being that Intim Pivot, being that Moxie's Choice Scarfer and things of the sort. Really solid pickup here for Matt. And again, I really like the Klefki pick. I love that mon this gen. I think it's very solid, and it really filled out 2 important. Really needed.
Yeah. All right, guys. So before Owen's bladder blows, we're gonna take the break now. So we're gonna take a little bit of a break before we start round number 6. So that we're gonna start a little bit earlier. So don't go anywhere. We're gonna put this. We're still gonna be here, but we're gonna be back in a couple minutes, and to start round number 6. So stay tuned. Where is...
you again.
I was unmuted. Thanks, Owen. I guess that's what it was.
Yep.
That was Rotom Mo that goes to the graveyard. Sad Panda. I don't want to talk about it. Go
Yes,
for
you
it.
got Rotom Mo.
Bronzong.
I'll take over. Mephisto picked up Bronzong starting in round number 6. Really solid steel type, giving has rocks on deck between T-Tar, Sandy Shocks, and Bronzong. Also gives him another ground resist / immunity, whereas 3 Pokemon on his team right now are weak to Earthquake. Immense isn't necessarily the Pokemon that you always want to be using to switch into offensive grounds. It's also an Edgequake resist, so that combination of Earthquake plus Stone Edge is going to be a lot easier to switch in on this team, whereas before, it didn't really do so. So I like this Bronzong pickup a lot. It's going to be a reliable rock setter and switch into things to, plug the holes of things like T-Tar and Sandy Shocks. It is tough that it doesn't resist fighting as a psychic type, but he does have Pex, Ments, and Houndstone as an immunity for that T-Tar, so I don't think it's all too bad.
Yeah, fantastic, Mon. And I got muted on Monch too, which is even worse. I feel
His
so
favorite,
terrible.
his boy.
Oh my god, the best Rotom form. This is so terrible. Next up, we have his Arcanine, Arcanine, however you want to pronounce it. Fantastic fire type Pokemon. This was the Mon that I went rampant on with in my BBR Season 2 run, which has got me to finals. This is one of the main staples and reasons why I went so far. It was such a reliable pivot. It had access to teleport before, which doesn't have this generation, which made it that offensive pivot, but it's still nonetheless a fantastic Pokemon that's able to be offensive with access to its own fire type stab like Flare Blitz and being able to cover with a priority with extreme speed, access to Wild Charge to get super effective damage on the water type Pokemon, which is really nice, access to Morning Sun for recovery, Snarl if you want to get spicy, drop special attack. It also get access to Will-O-Wisp, which is really nice. It can still be that support Pokemon and is able to really be offensive as well, so it fills up a lot of roles. Losing teleport is big, but nonetheless it still does Arcanine stuff.
Next up, we have Big Orthworm, one of my favorite. I don't think there's many cuter Pokemon other than Orthworm and his really weird arms out of his, but really important for d.rey to pick up a steel type right now, and he recognized that, grabbed it right away. Whether it be as a rock setter, as a spike setter, it can't shed tail like we mentioned, but it's still very solid defensively with that Earth Eater ability, which is awesome on this team in particular because d.rey does not like ground types at this point at all. He really doesn't appreciate the move Earthquake or Earth Power, so having a steel type that's immune to it, just like something like maybe a Bronzong, but not only that, actually get killed by it, is a really clutch aspect. It can also rock out with Iron Defense and Curse sets with Body Press, Iron Head or Heavy Slam, Earthquake, plenty of options in that regards. It really kind of just feel like Steelix, less bulky Steelix with more hazards is kind of like the way I look at Orthworm. And I really do like Steelix and I really like Orthworm. So yeah, really solid Pokemon for d.rey.
Yeah, so like we had just had a question by Soulblaze that we remove Shed-Tail from Orthworm. Yes, Shed-Tail, the move in general is banned, so I can't use it unfortunately. But nonetheless, like he said, it's still a fantastic mon. But I get to talk about Hydreigon. So Hydreigon on this team looks really good. So fantastic pick, bro. This Pokemon has fallen from grace, but still does the same stuff as it did last gen. It just doesn't do it as well, if not better, depending on how much you value Stealth Rock. If you need a Stealth Rocker, now you have Hydreigon, which is actually really kind of funny. I don't know why they like the Hydreigon and said, let's just give him rocks. It still has access to U-Turn, which is really funny. Access to Dark Pulse, Draco Meteor, it can still Dragon Dance, a great Pokemon. It lost Roost, so it gained Stealth Rock, but it lost Roost. So it doesn't have like that quote unquote longevity to be that defensive pivot, but I don't really remember many Hydreigons in the past that really ran Roost very often. A lot of Choice Scarfers, a lot of nasty plot break move things, which is really nice. So still a great Pokemon.
Next up, we have Slowbro John grabbing that Fizz Def bulky water, which is a really nice pickup on this team. He's starting to kind of think about filling up that defensive backbone a little bit. He had a lot of offense, a lot of potential momentum. Not a lot of having Slowbro as that regenerator pivot in the background is going to be great. Losing teleport is super tough for it. I will not lie. Very, very tough for it this gen. But it still functions great as a pivot, whether it be as a Rocky Helmet, Fizz Def Wall, or even with an Assault Vest as kind of like a jack of all trades. Check everything that a blanket, like in a blanket sense, boosting up its SPDF while still being really bulky on the Fizz Def side. You can Calm Mind, you can Nasty Plot, you can Trick Room. You can do pretty much all the things that Slowking can do that we mentioned earlier. You just can't teleport out of there anymore, unfortunately, but it's still really, really good at its job. It's very annoying, has incredible coverage, and Future Sight plus Chen Pao and Quackleval and Goldango is going to be so obnoxious in conjunction with Hazards. I think if he can throw those up in the air, he's going to be in a good spot.
And next up we have is Tauros. Tauros is a fantastic mon. I like Tauros a lot. This is the split we have, right? So now the Aqua Tauros is gone and the Fire Tauros is gone. This is the better design, I think, in my personal opinion, but nonetheless still functions really well. Depending on which one you like the most, they both basically do really, really big things for a team. So this mon is really nice defensively for this team specifically. The Paldean Fire Tauros has access to Will-O-Wisp because being a fire type, which is actually really, really nice. Having access to be a physically defensive tank plus Will-O-Wisp and having access to Body Press, while Body Press still being a stab, is really nice for it. It still has the base 100 speed, so same as the Aqua Tauros. It still has access to the Raging Bull that turns into the fire type move, so it has an alternative as a physical offensive move that is in Flare Blitz in case he doesn't want to run that secondary recoil damage, which can be kind of unfortunate in some matchups, but he has some options now, which is really cool.
Next up, we have Iron Jugulis, which is Hydreigon, but has a thing for robots or something, but very cool mon nonetheless. And it offers a great speed tier for Kurt, kind of bridging the gap between that Volcarona and that Iron Bundle with 108 base speed. Now, it doesn't have as much defensive utility, and it might not be as strong as Hydreigon, with as good of a dual stab combination, but Dark Flying is obviously incredible. We've seen it from the likes of Pokemon like Mandibuzz, and especially offensively from Pokemon like Galarian Moltres in the past. So I think it can be great in that regards with Dark plus Hurricane and really solid coverage like Flamethrower, Earth Power, which we already said Hurricane, Hydro Pump, and things like that. It can grab momentum, and it can be really scary, especially with a booster energy as well, either boosting speed or boosting special attack, and being really, really scary offensively for a lot of teams to deal with, and still has some decent niche applications defensively with a very solid defensive typing as well.
Yeah, and then now we have my boy or my girl, because it's a fairy type. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. I love Tinkaton. Now I have a big love for Tinkaton. There's a lot of Tinkaton hate, and I also will admit I had drafted it last season and then I dropped it. But let me explain. I switched it into a ground type move and it just didn't fit the roles that I have on that team. But nonetheless, this is a fantastic typing. The Fairy and Steel being that just such a good offensive and also defensive pivot is really nice. It is not strong whatsoever, but having access to a base 160 power steel type move and gigaton hammer is really cool. It's no drawback, and you just can't click it twice in a row, so choice band sets are basically eliminated.
That's a drawback. That's a drawback, Daniel. That's literally what a drawback is. Oh my gosh.
Great Pokemon in my personal opinion. Having access to Play Rough as well, knockoff for utility, gives access to Swords Dance if you really want to get that extra juice. Fantastic Pokemon. I think that Tinkaton is very slept on. I think that in the right hands, that isn't mine, it can still be exploited really, really well.
Now we have Envy here picking up Rev Room, and I had to, because it is a car engine Pokemon, a Pokemon of all time, but it does give Envy a steel type. It does give him a grounded poison as well, which can be pretty clutch. T-Spikes is an option as well, and I believe shift gear, correct? Yeah, it can definitely shift gear. It struggles a little bit in its coverage options, but it can bulldoze steel resist, which can, be clutch in its own right. It can grab momentum with Parting Shot as well. The fact that this Pokemon does not get either high horsepower nor wild charge, the car Pokemon, makes me a little bit upset. But other than that, I mean, it does offer some decent niche defensive application with both access to filter, reducing its weaknesses by just a little bit, as well as overcoat. Steel poison is pretty tough for grounds coming in. Right now, offensive grounds are looking pretty phenomenal in Envy's team. So I hope he patches that up just a little bit later. But securing that steel type, securing that grounded poison, it offers a lot of roles to his team.
Yeah, now we have Iron Thorns. Very scary Pokemon, but also a meh Pokemon. Having access to Dragon Dance, we have the electric rock type version of Tyranitar, the Paradox Pokemon with access to Court Drive. Very cool, Mon. It's just tough in regards to like the defensive prowess to be able to come in and take hits and still get a Dragon Dance off, so it's going to need a little bit of support. But this thing can still be very scary with one Dragon Dance up. Having access to Thunder Punch as well as Wild Charge is pretty cool. Having access to Stone Edge for its stab. It's got some cool options that it can run. I've seen some dice sets come up, so we'll see if he's able to be creative with it. Being able to get that Pokemon that has the opportunity to set up and sweep is really nice. So it's really cool to be able to get rid of those bulky water types that kind of this team struggles with a little bit, so it's able to threaten those mons. It doesn't want to take a water type move itself, but it's still able to come in and break them regardless. So it's interesting to see a electric type that's going to fill that water type killer role that is also weak to water type, so we'll see how that works out.
Speaking of killing, Matt killed his cool sword and shield theme with picking up Garganacl right here. Now, Garg does offer him a very solid stealth rock. Croak in that role, so having at least 2 very, very solid Pokemon defensively. Also gives him a... It's not Crook. Again, this Pokemon in general, I feel like this pick takes a lot of pressure off Crocodile defensively, which I do like, because Crook is so good offensively. It also cannot be statused, I believe as well, right? That's how Purifying Salt works. Cannot be statused. Can be a solid Curse or Iron Defense Sweeper in the right option. And then Salt Cure is obviously a really obnoxious. Those Water and Steel types that want to switch into Rock types typically are really not going to appreciate taking that Salt Cure and losing 25% or whatever it is every day. I will say, Garg isn't as potent as it is in draft as it is on the Spoken Ladder, because when you know it's coming and you can slap on a Covert Cloak onto something and kind of make the Pokemon null and void and not a big threat anymore, it does lose a little bit of its potency, but it does at least force that prep. No leftovers, no boots, whatever. And if they don't, they're going to get punished. So it's a solid rocker for his team at the very least.
Yeah, exactly. So here's the round recap, guys. I think it's a good round. There's really a lot of role filling here. A lot of Pokemon that are coming in now that are not as good as they were last time. I'm talking to Arcanine and to Slowbro. Like you said, losing teleport is big here, but what's the biggest thing that comes out to you here?
I think the Hydro Core is pretty cool, seeing Jugulis and Hydro. I like the Tauros Fire here from Pokegame. I love the Rotom pickup from Jesse. There's just a lot of solid lower tier Pokemon picked up. Arcanine, and not even lower tier, mid tier Pokemon. Orthworm, Slowbro, all getting picked up this round, and teams are really starting to fill out and trying to, fill those defensive roles and niches and even things as well. So I definitely think that there's some cool ones. I do want to mention, I love Hydra. I love my pick, but it did use Roost a lot, and that really does hurt me. I'm definitely excited to use it.
Yeah, it's one of those mon that people are like, I saw the chat. We're like, Hydra's still there? I mean, it's great. It's just not as good as it was last gen, so we'll see how it works out.
Oh, for sure.
So next up we have is round 7. So now we're moving with Mr. Matt O'Shea and the Montreal Milotic. So Matt is going to go ahead and bring in Gallade. Fun fact, this is my bad. So Owen is the one that does the tiers, and he's like, hey, don't forget to move up Gallade. Don't forget to move up Gallade. And I said, bet I won't forget to move up Gallade. And I didn't. So I thought, I went into the actual, so I blame Kurt and John because the doc is very confusing. And so I was supposed to move this thing up. I think it was 7 points. And so it was supposed to be moved up by a lot because sharpness made this Pokemon very tough to deal with. And so, my bad. He ended up getting a discounted Gallade. This Pokemon with sharpness being able to boost those Sacred Swords, which are already stabbed, to boost those Psycho Cuts, which is already stab, access to Leaf Blade. It still gets knockoff. Great Pokemon in general, being able to set up just an agility to boost up your speed and literally sweep an entire team. It's absolutely nuts. This is my bad. I'm sure that Matt doesn't mind, but nonetheless, it was my bad.
I'm sure he doesn't. I'm sure he does. Next up, we have Amel here grabbing Toedscruel, and I don't know why. I just look at him. He looks like an Amel mon. Now, I do think this Pokemon has some. I think that Grass Ground. Oh, we went backwards.
I went backwards. Hold on.
And we'll keep talking about Toedscruel, but it does have some pretty incredible traits, right? Grass Ground is a great type defensively and offensively. It's pretty annoying. We look at Pokemon like Torterra, who have been nuisances in the past. It does get access to screens. I think it gets access to spin, both rocks and spikes, and spore. The biggest downside to the Pokemon is obviously its ability, Mycelium Might, I believe it's called, which always makes its status moves go second. But I really don't think there are that many terrible applications of that, other than Spore. Spore going second always on a Pokemon that's, you know, decently fast as Toedscroll is pretty unfortunate. And maybe if you want to rock out with the screens variant, like having slow screens every time isn't a great idea. But other than that, it's still really solid. Leaf Storm and Earth Power are pretty obnoxious to switch into, and moves like Dazzling Gleam. And he runs really funny, which is always an important thing, to always have a funny haha mon on your team, and I think this fits it perfectly. So I think it's really solid. Also gives him a ground resist, which right now, the move Earthquake gave Amel violent nightmares. So I definitely think this is a pretty solid aspect here.
Yeah, it fits in a lot of stuff on his team. That Earthquake thing was the first thing that I popped out, because when I look at this team in team prep, we're like, oh man, I just bring Earthquake button and then we're done. And then if he ends up being a Tera normal Dragonite and you're already a Tera normal, there's no switch into a choice banded Earthquake. So it's really cool to have a resist, even though it's more of a special defensive Pokemon. That's nice to still have that resist to be able to invest more defense points in EVs, which is really cool. But next up we have is Brute Bonnet. Brute Bonnet is gonna be that ground type resist that he wants to come in. So having a 4 times weakness to U-turn is unfortunate, which is why I'm not the biggest fan of the dark grass typing. Having a momentum move that just does so much damage is kind of unfortunate, but still Brute Bonnet is kind of a bulky Pokemon nonetheless. It's more offensive compared to the Amoonguss counterpart. This is the Paradox form, the past Paradox form of it, so it does have access to that photosynthesis that will take advantage of this team specifically. With Torkoal is really, really good. Being able to come in and automatically gain a boost to whatever stats the highest. Speed is going to be a 1.5 times boost, but anything else is 1.3, so having a free life orb if he's offensive is really cool, and having access to Sucker Punch is phenomenal for some priority. Gets Seed Bomb for its other stabs, good coverage stuff.
Next up, we have Big Pincurchin. Now, he boost up and do some damage. I'm not the biggest on the Pokemon in general. It does give him spikes, but he already has that pretty heavily in things like Clodsire and Greninja. It is a Pokemon that can kind of bully some waters, which his team does struggle with a bit up to this point. His fat waters are pretty obnoxious for it, but regardless, it's going to be able to grab... No, it doesn't get Volt Switch, does it? Does it get Volt Switch? I have to look at it. It doesn't get Volt Switch, so it is the only electric terrain setter, and then maybe he gets a, you know, Quark Drive mod a little bit later on. But right now, it really is only that Valiant, and it can almost be a detriment. They have a really scary, you know, Iron Mon or Quark Drive mod. Iron Mon sounds weird. Quark Drive mod, boosting their stats and things like that. So.
Yeah, he's on a slippery slope there, but with Iron Valiant in general, I think it's going to be really nice to utilize that, because it may be just be the one mon that comes, so we'll see how he's able to patch that up later. But next up we have is Gardevoir for Kirby. Gardevoir is a very reliable Pokemon for Kirby. He's very, I need a fairy type, I can draft Gardevoir kind of person. So Gardevoir is still a fantastic mon. I believe it's still retained Mystical Fire as well, so it's one of those fairy types that still has ability coverage moves on that steel type. It also has access to Focus Blast. Who wants to run Focus Blast when you don't have to, right? So fantastic Pokemon defensively, even though it's not the most defensive Pokemon, it's more offensive, but it's still good to be able to come in and switch on those fighting type moves, because right now that's on Volcarona, so we'll see he's able to utilize it.
Next up we have Dragology for Pokemon right here, giving him that grounded poison which he didn't have already, giving him a strong dragon type. Blaze Tauros, Iron Treads, Palafin, and things of the sorts. It can also force in potential steals, you know, to take chip for the Espathra a little bit later on. It does have access to Focus Blast, Nuke through a ton of those as well. And adaptability Dracos and Sludge based off this thing do not have good switch-ins. Whether it be Specs variants or even Assault Vest variants with crazy Spadef, it's really, really solid in that regard. It gives him his own T-Spiker as well outside of Meowscarada, which can T-Spike, but typically wants to run Spikes over T-Spikes and doesn't have the move slot for both. So getting that T-Spike option is great, and having that T-Spike absorber.
Now we have Vochin. We have the community shadow leader. The snail is here. Vochin, a defensive Pokemon with the defensive typing of grass and dark. Great Pokemon nonetheless, though. It doesn't get the craziest coverage, but it does get access to Stab Knockoff, which is actually kind of nice. Leech Seed is really annoying to deal with. It's still a very defensive mon. Having the ability to drop down, I believe, physically offensive. So I think it basically this ruined Pokemon when it reduces physical attacks every time it comes in, which is really cool. To have more of a Spadef and be able to remove Phys Def on an ability is really nice. I personally have not seen this thing one shot as well, kind of to the same regard as the moose that we saw before. So we'll see if he's able to use that this season.
Oh, next up, sorry, it's me. I was totally spacing out. Now with Talonflame, I know it's double fire. I think I have an important thing when it comes to Paldea Dex draft right now. Fit rules in other areas. And I really, really wanted the speed tier that Talonflame offered. And it also gives me another fairy resist, which is really important. Some priority and Gale Wings Brave Birds. Slash duel. Still, no, it doesn't. Priority Brave Birds, which is nice. Will-O-Wisp Mon, U-Turn Momentum. And again, it's double fire. But Moth isn't always going to be a fire type, with it changed into a water type potentially. And I definitely don't want to use Moth super defensively in a lot of weeks, because this is that WinCon Mon, it's that Tera Captain, that focal point. So I think Talonflame offers me that speed tier and a lot of other defensive purposes as well.
Shout out to Vepsis. I figured that I'd actually draft Quillfish, and I can't lose the game if Quillfish is on my team, right? For those who know, Quillfish is actually a fun fact. The first time I've ever played a matchup where I physically could not win the game because I couldn't beat a Quillfish. It was so sad. Now I ended up making it on my team. I love Quillfish. Fantastic poison and water type. It still has access to toxic spikes and regular spikes, which is what I really wanted for this team. Losing Pain Split really freaking sucks, but nonetheless it's still a really good defensive water type to be able to come in and just spam intimidates, which is really nice for dropping attacks, and have that really reliable fighting type switch in, which is really good for this team. So I'm really glad I ended up pulling this off.
Next up, we have Big Mudsdale here for Del. His bottom half of his draft, like his fatter side, is really slow and really bulky, and Mudsdale's one of those Pokemon, whether it be with setting up reliable stealth rocks, close combat, and earthquake especially, obviously, rock coverage and things of the sort, or compounding stamina boost and throwing off really strong body presses. Very, very reliable stealth rocker, which Del did not have up to this point, so that's a very nice thing to grab right now. It can roar things around, be that fizz def wall and pivot if Dondozo doesn't want to, or Dondozo can't come because it's a little bit too passive in a matchup, as well as be solid from the Spadef side as well if you really do invest properly, while still gaining those stamina boosts. Very one-note Pokemon, not too versatile, but it does its job well.
So here's another magic bouncer, which is what I'm assuming was the biggest want for this team, and also the speed tier. So it's able to come in and have that 110 base speed, which is clutch. It doesn't get really much coverage. Espeon does for psychic types, which is unfortunate, but Espeon being able to come in and magic bounce hazards away is really cool, and another niche opportunity to ensure that hazards don't set up on your team, because right now he doesn't have removal. Correct me if I'm wrong, that Salamis doesn't get defog. I don't think it does.
No, it does.
So right now this is.
It doesn't bounce. No, you can still defog. It just makes it to where the evasion drop.
Yeah. No, it's Salamis. Does Salamis have access to defog?
Oh, I don't know actually. Let me check.
There you go. So that may be his only form of hazard control, so which makes a lot of sense for this Espeon. What do you think about this Dunsparce?
It cannot defog. Oh, you know what I think about the Dunsparce. This is my boy. This is Gen 9 Wiki. I will draft this thing at any point possible. Pick. Absolutely love this Pokemon. Insanely bulky with great defense stats in 80 and 75, but alongside that 125 HP stat, it is so bulky. It can set up with Coil, it can set up with Calm Mind, it can Glare, it can Rock, it has crazy early gen normal type coverage on both the physical and special side. You can rock out with like Coil, Facade, or Hyper Drill sets with like Drill Run, or you can rock out with Calm Mind, Boom Burst sets and be a big nuisance. This Pokemon is so hard to kill, especially if you slap a heavy duty boots on it. And we're just throwing off big attacks and high base power attacks and being unkillable. Love them on.
Yeah, unfortunate design choice though. Thanks, Game Freak.
Boo. He's cool. He's big to Dunsparce. That's my boy.
Yeah, dude. So like, for me in this round, I think it's cool. I think the best choice for the team overall is Pokegames with the fucking, what's the thing called? Totally forgot what the name is. There you go. So that's a good addition to this team. Now, my biggest concern here is what Numnexus does with Pincurchin. It probably was one of those things where he thought in his mind that he needed to take it now to avoid it getting sniped. But like Owen said, the only Pokemon that could really take advantage of it right now was Iron Valiant. So I'm curious to see what he does with the rest of his draft. But what are you thinking here aside from the Gallade, which I know you're going to mention?
Well, the Gallade, the first and last pick. Glade was mad underpriced. We mad underpriced the last season. Mistake on my end. But this season it's your fault. So Glade was a big oversight, and Matt was able to take advantage. attaboy for him for doing that. But also the Dunsparce, like I said, I think normal the format right now. Plus, Jaybear was so weak to opposing ghost types up to this point. And you'll see later his dark type that he ends up grabbing isn't a ghost resist. So the Dunsparce is going to be a very important part of this team. I think it's going to come a lot to a lot of games. And it's going to be very solid. So big pickup from Jaybear. I like that a lot.
And then hopping into round number 8, my friends, we have the wheel coming back around. We have the low kicks. So low kicks is going to be an interesting mon to see in draft. Fantastic Pokemon overall in regards to like being offensive. So it does do that role really nicely. But low kicks is going to be one of those mons that it's able to either clean up a game end game, or it's able to knock something out that it's going to be very terrifying for his team to deal with that's already set up, because it does have access to Sucker Punch and First Impression, which is really cool for stab wise, and access to Tinted Lens is really cool to basically have no resist to its own stab. So a Steel type will take neutral damage to a First Impression, and also like a Fairy type will take neutral damage to a Sucker Punch, which is really nice. Access to U-turn for momentum in case he wants to pivot in on a check that the opponent wants to bring for low kicks. It's got pretty solid coverage. It's got a low kicks version of high jump kick, which is really good. So it's got good coverage in regards to getting super effective damage on the opponent, which is really nice. But low kicks design is just top tier. So I'm curious to see how he pulls this off.
Oh yeah. Next up, we have Cloyster here from Mephisto. Giving him more spikes, which is obviously nice. Giving him that shell smash. Cloyster's going to be able to function a lot more than typically on other teams, because he obviously has the water. Gives him priority and Ice Shard, which priority in this generation in particular is very important. Scary offensive types can be, especially with Tera boosting up, getting scary. Really clutch aspect of it. It did get nerfed this generation though, and since it lost 2 very important moves in its move, the first of which being Explosion. Closer really appreciated Explosion on like lead hazard sets, but it also lost Rapid Spin, and I did not know that when I drafted it the first time. I'm sure he probably knows that. But I think that would have made this pick even better for this team, because like you mentioned, his only form of removal is Magic Bounce, but regardless, Cloyster's going to be a fun, nice hyper offense pick to set up and cheese through some teams.
The draft stream is over. Mimikyu has been picked. Let's freaking go. Mimikins is off the board. Shout out to G-Double. What a great friend. What a great Pokemon. A lot of people don't like it. I think it's fantastic. It's a good Pokemon to come in and literally finish off the game for you if you can get chips on things. And he has mons on his team to allow Mimikyu to be successful, i.e. the Slitherwing, the Magnezone, and the Arcanine, to be able to get rid of opposing Steel type Pokemon is really nice. And also to get rid of normal types, which is fantastic for it. But the dual typing of Ghost and Fairy is basically unresisted, which is top tier, and this thing having its disguise ability nerfed sucks, but still is able to clean up a game end game, which is really good.
So you're lucky I didn't get to talk about Mimikyu, but you're not lucky I didn't get to talk about your fucking Blissey pick. Blissey offers something pretty important for D.Rey's team. It's going to offer him immunity, whereas he doesn't really appreciate Grimmsnarl. Again, well, it does resist it very well. It doesn't like taking those hits. It wants to sub screens. It wants to stay around a little bit longer typically. It doesn't want to be used to switch into things defensively as much. So Blissey does offer that. And it can Wish Pass around and be a nuisance, but it is so passive. It's so passive. It lost access to Heal Bell. It lost access to Teleport. It's very big taunt fodder. And on a team like this, as offensive as it, I'm not the biggest fan of the pick because of how big the momentum suck is. But it does offer that ghost resist at the very least.
Yeah, it's a fun fact. I didn't know it lost Heal Bell until after the draft, so here we are. Next up we have is Gothitelle. I'm a big fan of this Pokemon. Shadow Tag is indeed allowed on Gothitelle, so he can use that. So the ability to come in and trap something that's going to keep maybe Iron Tusk or Iron Moth from winning the game is fantastic. So either you trap it or you force your opponent to prep for it, and then now it has a different item that is in Shell Bell. So now basically you have to ensure that your mon doesn't get trapped in order to win the game, or to ensure you don't lose the game. This can also be a setup threat in itself. It has access to Calm Mind, so it's able to be physically defensive and set up Calm Minds and win the game. A lot of versatility and a lot of ability to win the game with Gothitelle.
Next up we have John picking up the last fairy on the board problem. Other than the NFV ones in Douchbun, and as cute as he is, not the best Pokemon in the world, but it's very cheap. So I will say it's very cheap. It provides okay wish support despite its a lower HP stat. It gives him a fire immunity, which is always a nice. Having an immunity is always a very good thing. It kind of checks Chiyu as well. It resists its dual by Psychic, but it resists the dual stabs, which is nice. And it can be, a pretty big nuisance in that regard. I know John's used it well in the past, but obviously not super ideal, but there's only so much you can do in a Paldea Dex format, and I really think that this is like a telltale example of how little Pokemon there are in this format.
Yeah, and so now we have a Miss Magius going with PokeMMD. Great Pokemon offensively. It's really nice and niche. This is Gengar from Gen 6. Great Pokemon. Having access to Levitate, coming in and being immune to those ground type Pokemon is actually kind of clutch to have. Not only an immunity to normal types, but also now an immunity to ground types, which is actually really, really good. And also the immunity to fighting types. So lots of immunities, and being able to come in and be an offensive threat is fantastic. It's pretty fast. Gets access to great coverage, so it's able to fill that role, which is really good. I know that Shayquaza had this last season, and he did really, really well with it. It was one of his Tera captains, but nonetheless, Miss Magius is still really good in regards to coming in on a lot of opportunities with immunities and being able to threaten the opposing Pokemon with great coverage.
Alrighty, next up we have Kirby drafting Palmot here. Now again, not a, but it does give him a solid offensive fighting, which is always be, and another Pokemon Waters. And I think an important thing this generation with water types losing Scald exclusively outside of non-in-the-game Volcanion is now you can draft more physically offensive checks to Waters and not have to worry as much about switching them in and getting burned. So things like Serena and things like the Palmot are going to be able to check those things a lot better. It can still grab momentum with Volt Switch. That double shock move to get rid of your electric stab or your electric typing can always potentially be very clutch. Iron Fist is obviously great as well. Volt Absorb on a team that doesn't have a ground type up to this point is again very, very solid in a clutch aspect. But that plus elemental punches and things like that, pretty solid.
Yeah, so that not having access to Revival Blessing sucks, but it's still a really good Pokemon nonetheless. Abomasnow. It going this low is this late is kind of nuts. Abomasnow got such a buff with the buff to Hail, or now it's Snow, I should say. Snowscape turning from Hail to Snow is great for the ice types, being able to boost ice type defenses by 50%. So this gets that buff just by coming in, which is fantastic. And slapping Assault Vest, this Pokemon is very tough to deal with. Great coverage on the physical and the special side. It also has access to dual screens, which is really good. Being able to set up and just basically have that support for the rest of the team is fantastic. Abomasnow in itself being offensive and being a good support mon, great pick for this team.
Next up, we have Big Mousehold, absolutely broken Pokemon. Now, admittedly, I'm not a big fan of this Pokemon, right? It's a Pokemon like Garganacl in the sense that, like, if you're building for this thing correctly, it shouldn't really ever get out of hand. Now, obviously, Mousehold does not have to hold a wide lens, but if you want any sort of reliability to not get hit by that, to hit all 10 of your population mobs and actually do damage, you're going to kind of have to be wide lens or you're going to miss eventually. It's very low chance for you to get 10 otherwise, but it does offer some removal, and Tidy Up is an incredible move as well. There's two really cool signature moves in this one. Tidy Up and Population Bomb are both really, really cool. Technician Bite, I believe it also gets Low Kick as well. It's Steel type, so it could do some fun things, especially, and it really does force some prep, so it's solid in that regard.
And it makes me happy. Some people like the design sucks, but the fact that the front mouse is holding back the baby mouse, as a dad, fantastic. Now we have Skuntank. Skuntank, such a good Pokemon. Shout out to Kurt. I love Skuntank. I think it's a good mon. It's a dark and poison type. He hates this Pokemon, but it does fill in some good utility for him. It does have access. I believe it still has access to Defog. I may be tripping, but I think it still has access to Defog. It has access to Toxic Spikes now, which is really good. Sucker Punch for some priority. It gets stab options physically, like Poison Jab and Sludge Bomb and Dark Pulse. And then he has access to physically offensive, so physical or special, either or, whatever you want to do. It also has access to Flamethrower for steel types. Good mon, good mon.
Next up, we have Toxtricity. We're kind of back on the Gen 8, but this Pokemon very, very strong. I really like the aspect of Tox that because it gives a really strong poison type to really punish those fairies that want. And just click a button. It gives them a strong special wall breaker. And Tox is just, it's known for that. Its speed tier is a little bit lacking, so you really do have to position it correctly. Mm-hmm. But with the specs or with the life form, Boomburst, Overdrive, and Sludge Wave, you had 3 stabs before Tera was a thing back in the day. Now, obviously, this isn't his Tera captain, but it essentially functions like you turn it into a normal type, at least clicking Boomburst, and that's really clutch. Now, obviously, choice sets or life orb sets are obviously great, but you can also rock out with shift gear sets, mix sets, a ton of things, so very solid.
Very, very good killer, very good win con. So Mimikins got drafted. That was the biggest highlight for me. But what do you take away from this round?
There's a couple, honestly. I really like Obama's incredibly slept on. Whether it be offensively or especially with the snow buff this gen, giving it that massive phys diff stat in the snow. It's really hard to kill. There's a lot of stab close combos that aren't killing. I'm a big Miss Maggie's fan. I love the speed tier. I love the offensive gen in general, are really solid. So those are probably my two favorites at the moment. I also like the Toxtricity pick from Matt a lot.
Yeah. All right, guys. So we're moving right on into round number 9. So next up we have is mattoshea. You want to go to get started off here?
mattoshea grabbing some spikies, which I think is important on a team like this. He have any. I don't think Garganac will get spikes. Only getting that for your Volt turn core of like Dragapult, Rotom, the Corviknight, the Toxtricity is going to be really clutch. It's also very strong offensively. It gives him a very solid speed tier that he did not have already in 110. So really kind of bridging that gap a little bit. Now, obviously, there's a big jump between Frostlass and Dragapult, but that's kind of just the nature of drafting Dragapult sometimes. But I really like this thing as an offensive spiker and just a big nuisance, spreading some Will-O-Wisp and status, maybe Destiny bonding, maybe taunting. Cool. Really good bond. I absolutely love Frostlass. A little bit worse this gen with no Poltergeist or Axe. Still very good nonetheless, and a great pick on Matt's team.
Yeah, the double ghost is actually really nice here. The ghost types are just so freaking good. Now we have Ice-Q. Fun fact, Ice-Q is Amo's favorite Pokemon, and we will admit that he is fantastic with this Pokemon. So we moved it from 1 point last season to 2. So, it's a good Pokemon though, guys. It did get a really solid buff in the snow. So I've seen him run sets where he runs Snowscape on Ice-Q to allow him to get the Ice Face back and also get that boost in defense. Great Pokemon with access to Freeze Dry, other ice type stabs. It gets Belly Drum if you still have the Ice Face up. So even though we do poke fun at this Pokemon, it's actually really solid. I liked it in the very beginning of Generation 8, but Aim was able to exploit that very well. You'll notice that he has a lot of budget Pokemon. That's also the big theme of Amo, but don't be surprised that he ends up pulling off really great suits with them. So we'll see how he does it.
Next up, we have Oricorio here, and I know this is I actually unplugged my mic, but I forget what it's called, but he actually has access to budget pick in my opinion. I really do like this Pokemon a lot. Getting access to Quiver Dance was a huge buff to it this gen. If we could do 2 Tera Captains, I think this would be a second. Being able, because once you Tera this thing, its Revelation Dance actually changes to the type it is. So you basically have like every type at your disposal, which is really cool in this guy. Quiver Dance is cool, and then Dancer is a really cool ability in very niche situations, and there's definitely some application that he can use to really have this thing do well. Really obnoxious mom, but really cool.
Yeah, it's going to be unique that he has access to all typing, so he's bringing all the birds to his matchup. So next up we have Titan. So we have a Pokemon that's able to abuse the fact that snow is now on this team. So this team now has terrain, this team now has snow. So weather and terrain all in one squad. Fantastic Pokemon to be able to abuse the snow, getting that double speed boost and also getting that 50% boost to its defense being in the snow with that ice type buff in the snow, which is fantastic. So it's a little bit easier to be able to get off those belly drums. So Titan with belly drum under snow with that speed boost is going to be nuts. Great coverage for this Pokemon. It has access to really hard hitting moves. So having another element to prep for this team is going to be kind of a headache, and it's a good mon to be able to literally pick up the game and win right off the end.
Next up, we have Hippowdon from Kurt. Another Pokemon. I really like Hippowdon defensively. Sand. But I don't think that's where Hippowdon thrives. Hippowdon thrives is just that bulky, obnoxious Fizz-Duff wall that sets up rocks. He slacks off, he clicks Earthquake maybe, and he whirlwinds things around. You can also rock out with Curse sets. I also think Choice Band Hippo is a really slept on set and really hard to switch into. People really sleep on how strong this Pokemon can get, provided it's given the right opportunities. And it's a really good defensive backbone to Kurt. Like we mentioned before, Palmot was his electric community, so now he doesn't have to run Volt Absorb Palmot anytime he plays a good electric type, which is a really nice aspect to his team at this point. So I'm definitely a big fan of this Hippowdon pickup, and it's really going to kind of help round out Kurt's defensive core with that Slowking.
Next up we have is the Forgotten Ditto. Ditto is really cool, especially early gen. And now we're in the early gen meta of Generation 9. It's able to allow him to come in and copy whatever Pokemon his opponent has and whatever stat boost that opponent has. So being able to basically redirect any sweep that may happen on his team and have a choice scarf on his Ditto and basically reverse sweep is a good element to have in team prep. It's able to come in and copy whatever he wants, and he can use the elements of that Pokemon, so it doesn't necessarily have to be a setup sweeper that's gonna reverse sweep his team. It could also be a utility Pokemon, so may say he doesn't bring Rapid Spin on his Iron Tusk and he faces a Pokemon that has hazards and Rapid Spin. He's able to come in and copy with Ditto and be able to use that utility on his opponent, which is actually a cool element to have.
Next up, we have John picking up Kilowattrel, giving him another Praise and Punishes Waters. Right now, he only had the kind of passive Wo-Chien, which definitely takes on Waters, but maybe in a little bit more slow. Kilowattrel gives him a little bit of speed. That Volt Switch / U-turn combo that he can pair alongside with something maybe like a Quackleval, forming a pretty solid Volt turn core, honestly, with Quackleval forcing in those waters, Kilowattrel coming in and forcing in. Really, honestly, it's a really good offensive typing. I like it.
Yeah.
From Zapdos, I'm trying to think of what type just genuinely stops that. Potentially bulky grounds, obviously, but then Quackleval's coming back in, then Chien-Pao's coming in, then, you know, all these different things, even Slowbro potentially coming in. So very solid pickup for John, considering what's left on the board.
Yeah, next up looks like you picked up Breloom. Breloom's a cool Pokemon. I like Breloom. Breloom with the grass and fighting type, still having the same exact stuff it had last gen, except more. Now they give it access to close combat, which is a cool pick to have. It still gets those Technician Mach Punches, which is clutch. Also Drain Punch for longevity if you want to get a little bit of health back whenever you click an attacking move is really cool. Still having access to Toxic Heal or Poison Heal is really nice with a Toxic Orb to make it one of those really great defensive tanks that are just going to continue to gain more health than a leftovers each and every turn is really clutch. Access to Technician boosted bullet punches, bullet seeds I should say, are going to be really nice for this Pokemon. So Technician boosted Mach Punches and bullet seeds coming off, already really good offensive attack stat is really clutch.
Next up, we have d.rey picking up Big Eel right here. Now, something I really like about really struggle with Fat One. Electro's at least going to help mitigate that. Now, obviously not a Pokemon with the most stellar recovery options, but something like Blissey, keep that guy healthy. You grab great momentum and U-turn plus Volt Switch. Acid Spray sets are really annoying on AV variants, especially with access to Giga Drain. It really beats down a lot of other grounds, and grounds are also really annoying for you right now. We don't have to worry about Excadrill or Zygarde in this metagame hitting you through that Levitate ability. So you're really going to be able to check a lot of grounds with this thing. It might have a lot of pressure on it, so you have to be very careful about how you this guy. There's a lot of pressure on one eel, but solid Pokemon nonetheless.
Yeah, first time I use it too, so I'm super excited for it. Next up we have is Pelipper. Pelipper apparently was like a really big snipe from another coach, but Pelipper going in round 9 is quite interesting. It brings them the water type, the rain element to this water type, which is really cool. Having access to boost stuff like Dondozo's attack power, which is really nice. It's interesting to see what he's gonna want to do with it. There's not a lot really much that pairs up with this team in regards to like adding rain. All of a sudden his other teammates kind of thrive. So I'm curious to see what he does in following rounds. But Pelipper did lose access to Defog, which is unfortunate, and it does still have U-turn, but Roost getting nerfed kind of sucks, and also losing Scald is unfortunate, but it still gets those 100% accurate Hurricanes and boosted Hydro Pumps, etc. But we'll see what he does.
Next up, we have Lucario from Mephisto, and a really late Tera. Now, I actually drafted Lucario. I think I had Lucario Amoonguss originally, and then I traded Mephisto this Lucario because I really wanted. I thought I could make Breloom Gothitelle work a little bit better. So Mephisto has this here with both Steel and Normal, getting that normal stab extreme speed as well as boosting up those Steel type moves to the nth degree is going to be very solid. He's going to be a very strong setup sweeper, even just a breaker. I think Life Orb Lucario with 4 attacks, potentially mix and things like that, is really tough for a lot of teams to deal with, especially with how frail this meta can be, and especially with how slow this meta. Lucario typically struggles because of its speed tier. Now it doesn't really do so as much anymore.
Baby Dragonite, we'll call it that. Quagsire comes up with the big hand wave. We love Quagsire. We have another unaware Pokemon as well as a water absorbmon, a good defensive piece to this team. With the water and the ground typing, it actually pairs up really well with a lot of this team. It's one of those Pokemon that's able to ignore those stat boosts like we've talked about before. So very excited to have Quagsire, to see Quagsire go here. Very good Pokemon. I know it's a fan favorite, which is really fun. Quagsire is one of those mons that's able to come in and sit in front of a lot of things. Losing Scald really sucks, but you know, it is what it is, right? So Quagsire is going to be one of those Pokemon that's going to be able to allow this team to be able to regroup itself in front of a setup sweeper, and it's also having the defensive pivot is really nice. But with finishing out round number 9, Eel is going to be the biggest thing. I didn't really get to talk about it this much on my team because Owen covered it there, but it's the first time I use it. It's been a very interesting Pokemon. I know that I got access to bulk up this gen, which is really cool, that Emo pointed out, but it's going to be interesting to use it. I don't really know what much it does, so I'm very excited to dip into it. But what's the biggest thing that stands out to you here?
I really like the Hippo pick. I really like Oricorio as a budget pick as well. And I think Deld grabbing the Pelipper this round is going to be a really interesting and kind of forced another aspect of prep to his team for other people to have to worry about, even if Rain is probably at the worst it's been in a long time this generation, with like Floatzel, Dreadnought being the premier sweepers. Just forcing that aspect of prep on this team is going to be a pretty cool aspect to it, really opening up the dimensions and making some other teams really have a headache prepping for it.
All right, team, we're hopping into round number 10. We're going towards the nitty gritty. We're going to come back on the wheel, and the very first pick of round number 10 is going to go to the graveyard, taking Hariyama. Hariyama is a really good Pokemon. It's a very solid fighting type Pokemon, and it is very fat. Same stuff that Iron Hands does, right? Still very fast, switches in on a lot of things with the thick fat ability, and still able to hit really hard. Having access to Drain Punch now is actually super duper clutch for it. Before, it had access to Close Combat, which is very hard hitting, but allowing this Pokemon to be a little bit bulkier than it was in times past, and being able to recover some health with a Stab Drain Punch is actually really nice. Fake Out shenanigans is actually kind of funny to do in the singles format, but could come in really clutch on some niche opportunities or some niche matchups where it basically would keep you from being swept, right? If you have that setup sweeper where they only have a little bit of health left, Hariyama can come in and hit a Fake Out with priority and be able to knock out that mon. So it's really cool to have that element to it. So we'll see what he does with it.
Big Dugtrio for Mephisto. Actually, as weird as it sounds, because there isn't necessarily a Pokemon on your team where like, wow, this Pokemon X being trapped. I really like this Dugtrio pick because just the thought, and it's not like my pick with Gothitelle. I think they're very similar since that. Just the thought and the ability that your opponent has to deal with of you being able to trap their check 2 Houndstone, 2 Sandy Shocks, 2 Ments makes them so much more threatening and potent because you're either forcing a Shed Shell or you're forcing them to make aggressive doubles or you're trapping them with your Dugtrio, which is awesome. Again, with Breedject, say you're checked by normals and darks. Dugtrio doesn't necessarily automatically beat those, but if I'm choice banned Dugtrio and I do 75% to your normal type with an Earthquake, you're not a Houndstone check anymore. So I actually really like that pick. I think it was a very smart by him.
Now we have Dreadnought. There it is. So back to back, we have Weather plus Weather Abuser. So Dreadnought's kind of funny. It's really cool. Floatzel was the other Weather Rain Abuser that's able to come in and really take advantage of that rain, but Dreadnought is able to do some fun stuff too. Getting that Swift Swim boost in the rain is really clutch. Even outside the rain, it could be really nice. It gets access to Stealth Rock, also Shell Smash, which is actually kind of clutch. So if he wants to Shell Smash in the rain, he gets that double zoomies. Really fast Dreadnought, so it's a little bit tougher to outspeed it. Its speed tier, even with rain, it still gets outsped from some stuff, so having the option to be able to Shell Smash and still get the rain boost is actually kind of clutch. Access to some really powerful liquidations, Stone Edges. We'll see how he abuses that this season.
Next up, we have d.rey with Billy the Butcher, Haxorus. Really cool mon on d.rey's team. Another mon that really takes advantage of Screamsnarl. Grimmsnarl screens, being able to set up Dragon Dances and or Swords Dance. But I think Haxorus is really solid outside of that, whether it be like in a choice band variant, 4 attacks, life orb variant. I've even seen 8 do well with its immense coverage between Earthquake, Close Combat, Dragon Stab, First Impression for priority. I believe it gets Iron Head, if not Iron Tail. It varies. It definitely gets Poison Jab. Great abilities in Mold Breaker as well as on Nerve, so no resist berries is always really clutch on a strong offensive Pokemon like this in the draft format. So really solid. We were all thinking he was going to go Goodra, but the Haxorus makes a little bit of sense as well.
Yeah. Now we have Ursaring. Ursaring is best bear boy. I love Ursaring, and now having access to Eviolite, the game still recognizes Eviolite and Ursaring having an evolution, even though Ursaluna isn't in the game just yet. So this can hold the Eviolite and get that defensive boost in Spadef and defense, which is really clutch. Great Pokemon to add to your team. This is your Ghost Resist. You can see that clearly. Great Pokemon to be able to come in and literally still clean house. And I do love the fact that it's able to run Eviolite, get the boost, and still be a status deterrent or status absorber, because it can still run Guts. So if you come in and burn this Pokemon and it has Guts plus Eviolite, and all of a sudden it gets a boost in attack and still have that boost in defense. So great mon. I think it's a good pickup.
Next up, we have John with the premier sand setter of all time. Big Sandaconda here. Now, Sandaconda gives John his ground, which at this point he really needs. And especially his ground type. I'm not the biggest on Sandaconda, personally. I won't lie to you guys. I'm not a liar. But he can set up rocks reliably. He can spread pairs, which is a really clutch aspect of this team. There's a couple things that can spread pairs on this team. And he's going to kind of do the job that John wants. John has one in the past, so I'm sure it won't be any different using it now. I know he really does enjoy Sandaconda. And Shed Skin is a great ability on it, being able to rest up, almost using it like a recover. You just kind of have to hope you don't get super unlucky with those those rest Shed Skin turns, but good pickup.
Yeah, that could be really unfortunate if it doesn't pull off the way you want it to. Next up, we have his Hawlucha. At first, I was thinking that Hawlucha may end up with Numnexus, but here it goes now, which is probably what the strategy was to take it here to avoid Numnexus taking this, as the terrain was taken. But in comes Hawlucha. Even outside of Unburden, Electric Seed, or Blank Seed sets, this is still a really fantastic Pokemon. He traded away Goldango, and this is the only Pokemon in the game that has Defog plus Mold Breaker, so it can still get rid of hazards in the front of Goldango. So even though that matchup isn't going to be it's only gonna be once each season, he is still able to get rid of those hazards in front of it if he needs to. So that's really clutch. Has access to U-turn and taunt. Good setup sets with Swords Dance. Fantastic Pokemon.
All right, next up we have Kurt here grabbing some Lycanroc. Lycanroc actually gives him a cool little sand aspect to this team. I kind of mentioned before that I'm not the biggest on Hippo Sand, but on this team, it isn't really a focal point, right? It's not something that's super important for his team to function, so I think it's a cool little aspect. A lot like Dell and his Pelipper plus Dreadnought, Lycanroc's going to function similarly. It functions great with Sand Rush, but even outside of Sand, Swords Dance and Accel Rock and Close Combat and all these moves are really solid, and again, priority in this gen is such an important thing, and Kurt has plenty of it on this team. Between Mach Punch Palmot, Accel Rock, Lycanroc, and Sucker Punch King Gambit, he's going to be in a good spot for a lot of these Pokemon, and his momentum gathering options like the Bundle, even Volk, like the Slowking, all the mons are really going to be good to get into bigger offensive threats.
Yeah, next up we have is Gyarados. Fun fact, this is the Pokemon I was thinking about taking outside Hackstros. It wasn't Goodra, it was Gyarados. Gyarados is one of those mons that's kind of tough to fit in to justify as like your only water type on your team. He does only have Greninja, so this can still function as a quote-unquote like bulky water type since it has access to Intimidate. And having the secondary typing of flying can still be a blessing outside being a curse, giving it the 4 times weakness to electric, but it can still be a great resistant to fighting types and immunity to ground types, so it can still function really well in that regard. And also the Moxie sets with Dragon Dance are still really clutch on this Pokemon. This isn't his Tera Captain, but it still functions as Gyarados did in the past.
Big Cerulege is next, and this Pokemon looks really scary under the sun. Obviously, its signature move, Bitter Blade, being basically a fire type Leech Life. I almost said Giga Drain, but it's Leech Life, basically, which is really strong. In conjunction with Shadow Sneak, obviously Shadow Claw, I believe, is reliable Ghost Stab, and Close Combat. It is very hard to switch into this Pokemon's Dual Stabs plus CC, and on top of that, it's a Fire Immunity, which is always really clutch on Sun because, right, his water type isn't a Pokemon he typically wants to switch into anything, despite it taking fire moves pretty well, unless it Terra Fairies. And it also has access to Weak Armor, so Weak Armor can really clean through teams that don't have the priority options to revenge it at 1 HP, or priority options that die to Shadow Sneak.
And then Mirror, we have it back to back. We went Cerulege into Armor Rouge, so we have the mascots of the game. Actually, I've been seeing these Pokemon literally everywhere as some of the most favorites that have come out this generation. Armor Rouge is still a fantastic Pokemon, outside to its counterpart Cerulege. This is the Psychic and the Fire version. Still a great Pokemon offensively on the special side. Basically does similar things as Cerulege does. It just hits a little harder on the special side. Its special move, the cannon move that it has is basically fire type Close Combat, which is really nice. It gets some really cool niche stuff. It gets access to Trick Room in case he really wants to go that route, which he can abuse with some of his Pokemon. But Armor Rouge is a really good special breaker to add to this team.
Next up we have Matt here grabbing Braviary, which does function as a ghost between Garganacl and Crocodile, as well as having naturally bulky Pokemon like Corviknight and Azumarill and Pult revenging them. But it does give him that. It gives him another flying type, dual flying, but not because like bulk up sets can be really scary. That normal flying and fighting is really, really solid and hits so many different things. And it can be very deceptively bulky with like a heavy duty set. Grab some momentum. Solid low tier pick here for Matt. And it's kind of just like he probably had enough points to get it, so why not get it? Is kind of how I see this.
Yeah, great. It's a great normal resist, great Pokemon in general. I think that Braviary is fantastic. It still has all the same stuff it had last gen, so it doesn't surprise me that I picked it up here. Now we have the round recap for round 10, right before we go into the very last round of round 11. I think that the only team that has enough, the only team that doesn't have enough points for a final pick, I think, is the Graveyard. So we're gonna run through the entire league except for one. So it's gonna be a little bit shorter this time. But before we hop into that, what I think that stands out the most here is that Hawlucha pick. I think that was kind of clutch in regards to it could have been a possible snipe as well as good utility for the team. But what do you think here?
Yeah, there's a lot of really cool picks. It's crazy to see how many points like that. I think it was a great pickup. I think a Lycanroc plus the Hippowdon was really cool. I really like the Reina aspect on Dell's team. Love the Gyarados. The Armarouge, Ceruledge are both really cool Pokemon. There really wasn't too many, like, you know, awful picks this gen. Oh, and Hariyama. Hariyama's the first left threat. I wish Jabber had some wish into it and a way to keep it healthy. But with an AV, with either Guts or Thick Fat or even Sheer Force, it can be a big nuisance for teams. I am going to mention, I am going to be doing the commands for everyone. Final round going in, so be sure to go check out their channels. They have draft analysis, most of them going up at 2 p.m. PST, which is in about 15 minutes. Some of them are already up right now, and of course, be sure to join the Discord server. And drop a like on the stream, help d.rey out.
I appreciate it, guys. So here we go, guys. The last round of the draft, hopping right on into it, we have Leafeon going with the Montreal Milotic. So Leafeon is an interesting Pokemon. Doesn't really get much for some of its checks, but it's still really great Wisher because it's one of the evolutions. That's one of the cool things that it has to it, as well as Baton Pass, which is nice for momentum. Having the Sun aspect with some chlorophyll action could be interesting if it has some manual Sun somewhere. But Leafeon basically comes in and allows another ground type switch in. It's also able to come in on some offensive water types, which is really cool. He does have Corviknight and he does have Rotom for the ground types, but nonetheless it still gives him another option. But being able to have, I do believe that this also got cut with Heal Bell too, but it's a good cleric nonetheless. It's able to pivot in with Baton Pass, like I said before, but this is a really good bulky option to be able to chew a hit and also switch back out. But it could also run Swords Dance with some Leaf Blade sets in case there's no resist. But go ahead and talk about the boy next.
Oh god, I don't know what you want me to say. Amel did his thing. Amel has like 10 points left over. Actually, I'm gonna look at how many points Amel has. Amel has 23 points left over because he thought it'd be he said there was nothing else he wanted, and if it was any other person besides Amel, I would be incomprehensibly roasting him, but he wins games, so he does well, and he's gonna do it with a Lechonk. We'll see how it goes. I would love to see him come once, but if that's not worth a sub, Amel drafting the Lechonk, I don't know what is, guys. Like Lechonk, Tera normal Dragonite plus Lechonk is the most broken. To triple normal. He also has the Zoro. Absolute demon.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and he made our graphics harder to make.
I will say I play Amel week 1, and I did, unfortunately, because it is Amel, have to prep for it. So here we are. I don't know where I'm at. Next up we have is Skull Villain. So now we have a true abuser outside all the photosynthesis Pokemon in this Sun team. So it's a great addition. One of many fire types on this team, but Skull Villain's able to come in and get that chlorophyll boost on the Sun that gets set up by Torkoal to get that double speed is really cool to be able to set up and sweep the rest of the team or clean them up. Has access to growth, which is a really awesome way to set up. But having access to grass type and fire types coverage in the Sun is really nice. This isn't a Tera captain, so there are going to be things like dragons that want to come in and switch in on it, but nonetheless it does have an opportunity to sweep.
Next up we have Nexus grabbing Fergraph, and I actually really like this. It gives them a great wish passer on 100 plus, really helping out things like Gyarados, Titan, Abomasnow, Tinkaton, and even things like Dirge and Clodsire, keeping them healthy. It gives him a ghost immunity though, which is imperative on a team that has dark type Greninja, giving him an actual ghost switch in, and it's really, really important. The Dragapult matchup doesn't look great because he's just going to U-turn. But other than that, he really does have a great check to most of the ghosts in this format that are currently allowed. So I think that's a really, really clutch aspect. It can also cheese through some teams with a priority, as well as grass moves with Sap Sip, I believe, and access to like agility and nasty plot and things like that. Oh, I forgot that this happened too. Oh
and then this happened.
Yeah.
He's like, oh no, the fucking giraffe left. So now I'm going to take Girafarig. So Farigiraf and Girafarig, I bet you this is the only time you'll ever see this happen where they go back to back. But Girafarig is going to be a little bit bulkier because it does have access to being able to utilize Eviolite, which is kind of funny. But this is going to be the Ghost Resist. That's basically the only reason this thing's on it. But it still has those really cool options for support, like Owen said, it basically almost does the same exact thing. Girafarig is not going to be looked at any other past draft, but now that it has access to Eviolite, it's actually kind of niche and funny, and it can come in and take a lot of hits and not dish a lot back, but it could take the hits. That's all it needs.
Baby Knackle Stack, look at him go. You barely see him on the slide because the white part like blends in.
Yeah.
So again, good value in the lower tiers, and I think it's actually a pretty value. Also having access to pure, so being able to switch in on opposing ghost types for a team that doesn't have a normal, because Ditto doesn't count, and a team that has dark type Meowscarada, which doesn't want to really switch it on anything. So I actually think as lower tier option, those offensive ghosts aren't going to be as scary, or at least there's going to be some kind of deterrent to clicking Spec Shadow Ball against this team, right? Or like a Choice Beta Shadow, whatever it might be, right? Now it is a bit passive. It's Garganacl, but a little bit more passive, which is unfortunate, but solid rocker, and for its price point and for what it offers the team, it's really not that bad of a pick. I've seen it do well in the past, so I can't complain.
Yeah, very creative Ghost Resist. Next up we have a Salazzle. Salazzle does Salazzle things. It's one of those mons that it fills its role very, very well as a revenge killer. The Fairy Dragon Steel Core Killer is what it's most notorious for, having access to the dual stabs of fire and poison, which is really nice, and also access to Dragon Pulse, which is really cool. Good coverage options. It gets access to Corrosion, which means that it can Toxic anything. This generation, a lot of moves have been cut from specific Pokemon, and Toxic was one of those things that happened, and this being a poison type and having access to Toxic being 100% accurate, and being able to poison anything, including steel types and including opposing poison types, are really clutch in some matchups if it may be a little bit harder to deal with. Who's your pick?
I gotta talk about Spidops. I'm gonna be honest, guys, I don't like it. I think he sucks. But I had 2 points left over, right? 2 points left over, and it wasn't much better. It really was not much. He does force some kind of prep. He gets rocks, he gets spikes and T-spikes. First impression, it has like a really good move pool, but I think its highest stat is its defense at like 90. Everything else is really bad, and even 92 defense or whatever is not good. So, not the best Pokemon in the world, but it forces prep, and it was 2 points. So what else can you in 2 points? So not the biggest, but not that bad.
Yeah, it does. It fills the niche role that forces prep. Spidops does what Spidops does. So nice to have webs. Next up, we pick up Barraskewda because I had the points and I figured, hey, having the speed tier, especially in this gen, is going to be so clutch. I don't have anything to abuse its I don't have Pelipper on this team, I should say, so I can't use the Swift Swim ability, but if I, played the double, I can take advantage that way. But this Pokemon with a 136 base speed stat, being the fastest Pokemon on this team to come in and run Adamant in a lot of matchups to just clean up whatever is left over from the game, is a really nice element to have. It did lose Flip Turn. That really sucks about it. It's a fish. I don't know why they took Flip Turn away from it, but here we are. Gets access to Aqua Jet still, Liquidation for some stab, great coverage in like close combat and Crunch and Psychic Fangs, which is really nice in Ice Fang, but nonetheless, fast Pokemon, clean up whatever's left over.
Big Komala. What a cute little guy. Now this gives pick because his Ghost Resist right now is going to be that Moon. Take a little bit of pressure off that guy, and I know I super harp on format with how good they are and how many teams try and snag one. He now has that. It's also a status absorber with that Comatose not being able to be burned, paralyzed. It's already basically asleep, so you can't really spore it or anything like that. Toxic, so great status absorber, passes wishes, and then those Sleep Talk last resort sets, you're playing no normal resist, and you find that opportunity to come in and click that Choice Band 800 million base power move, is gonna sting. So I think it's a pretty cool pickup here for Dell.
Yeah, Komala is cool to be able to get rid of those hazards and be that resist. It's cool Pokemon. Next up, we have Venomoth, and this is actually the very last pick of the draft. Venomoth is that cool Pokemon that could actually pick up and run away with the game if you disrespect it. Being able to have the tinted lens ability to have unresisted dual stabs is kind of nuts, and having access to Quiver Dance. Mace is a very slept on Pokemon. This isn't his Tera captain, so he can't just Tera into whatever attack that is going to be resisted or do the less amount of damage, but nonetheless Venomoth can still again pick up and run away with the game, so it does have to be respected. Having access to really niche moves to be able to push through some teams is really clutch, and I feel like Venomoth may be a little bit overlooked this season, so we'll see. But here we are, man. We're at the tail end. What are the thoughts on the exclamation point on some of these teams?
On the final round, I really like Venomoth as a just as a Pokemon itself, so really cool one. I really like the Komala for Dell. I really like the tippy top of the draft. Obviously, has to be Monk. So pretty demon. Good stuff here from Mr. Amel. He definitely.
Yeah, my biggest takeaway is Lechonk. That is not Oinkologne. That is Lechonk. So that is that's you see it correctly. That is the Eevee-like Lechonk on your screen. It is the only Pokemon that doesn't have a render. So this is the one mod we had to get this. We had to get the stream slides later because Marcus couldn't find a render for Lechonk. That's how crazy this pick was. But it's Amel. It still has to be respected, and it's gonna be nuts. Just wait and see. Make sure you subscribe to Amel. Subscribe to all the coaches that are going to be participating this season. Again, the BBR has 2 Wi-Fi divisions happening right now. Tomorrow, which is going to be Monday, March 13th, will be week number 1 for the BBR Developmental League, the D League. The draft analysis for those teams are already up. So please, down in the description below will be a link to the Discord server where you can find all of the videos for those coaches and for all of the games moving forward. And also for the main leagues, which you just saw, we will be posting all of our links to all of those videos so you can keep up with every single coach this season. In the description below will also be a link to their channel, so you can hop over to their channels now and watch the draft analysis where these coaches are going to talk about what they picked, why they picked it, what their thought process was, and what they were thinking that we may not know during this draft stream. So if you want to know a little bit more about those teams, make sure you go to the description, get those links, and watch those videos. Any final closing thoughts?
No, I'm really excited for the season. Again, I would love for you guys to go check out everybody, like D said, join the server, but also obviously drop D.rey a sub. These aren't easy to run, and they're very tiring. Drop D.rey a sub. Let's help push them towards that 1K. I want them there by the end of the season. You know, if you're catching this for the first time and you enjoyed it, you'll enjoy the rest of D.rey's content. So definitely drop a sub here as well.
Thank you guys. I appreciate it. Oh, and thank you guys so much for tuning into the draft stream. This season was very tough to pull off. The timer dropped. All of a sudden, we turned around really fast to get this going for you guys. We hope to be the first league that comes out with the brand new timer, and hope you guys enjoy this content. I'm happy to see some old faces coming in with the new. It's going to be a fantastic season. Follow the Discord, follow the Twitter, follow all your favorite coaches. That's all I got, guys. Thank you so much for tuning into the draft stream. With that being said, we're gonna get the heck up out of here. Have a great rest of your day, and above all else, be nice. Peace. And